Hello, we are back. Hope you enjoyed your lunch. I need to find, C-SPAN is not giving me something that's useful. So I'm trying to find, we're playing this, what seems like a regular game of trying to find this stupid trial. If you have a link for me, I would be so obliged. So obliged. Oh, come on. C-SPAN. This is what I got here. Present, share screen. Audio. This is what I have. This is C-SPAN. This is C-SPAN. And come on. This is former President Trump's. This is not it though. This is what ended by lunch. That's at 12:30. You should be looking for something at 3 o'clock. Let me refresh. No, that's not working. This is C-SPAN we're on. I'm on C-SPAN. Let's see if this is it. Is this it?
Your trip. Yeah. No, the visit is ready. Sounds good. That's what you were training.
I think this might be it.
Make sure that.
I think this is it. This looks like it. So I think we're good. We're good? I think we're good. This looks unfamiliar. Yeah, I'm looking at the. I can see the clock in the upper corner here. It says 1 o'clock in Colorado. All right, we are good. Woohoo! Now let me print this out.
That's
All right, now I gotta just print this out. Let me print this out on.
they his event at a nearby like and then that's like process to me. Cut it up. And so I thought the liberation was a thing that we could just yeah. And one is not a people. I would find it because it used to be the case that you need a lot of slogans.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Back over here. By the way, I forgot to mention it, but happy Halloween, everybody. If you celebrate Halloween, at least. Hope you have an enjoyable holiday. there.
We're ready.
Close it down. I sent the afternoon link to Vivo also. I don't know if I'll be able to make it in here or not. They're all waiting for the judge.
The novelty's worn off.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I wasn't gonna be late for this.
Should we just dive into it, Your Honor? Okay. Okay. So, Dr. Simi, I'm going to start with some exhibits here, and I'm going to talk about sort of intentionality and interpretation. So that's sort of what this. I'm going to talk about intentionality. Let's try that again. I'm going to talk about intentionality and interpretation as sort of the next part of what we're going to talk about. So let's bring up 1074. Okay. So Dr. Simi, I'm going to start with some exhibits here, and I want to talk about sort of intentionality and interpretation. So that's sort of what this. I want to talk about intentionality.
I got a guest here.
Hello. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Joe.
Hello, Joe. Oh my gosh,
Monitor on there, Your Honor?
this is insufferable to watch.
Yes, and yet so much fun. I have such a difficult time holding my back from this expert's name is Peter Simi, and I'm having a difficult time with that name, Peter Simi. Anyway,
Are they on cross still?
yeah, they're on cross. And this guy's been doing
Can we play just for the
phenomenally
first
well
5
so far.
speakers on this video, please?
Our job is to fight. We are in a fight. We are in a fight. We are in a fight.
Democrats are fighting as hard as we can.
Democrats are standing up to fight. We.
So you heard a number of speakers use the term fight, correct?
That's correct.
And I'd represent to you that those are leading members of the Democrat Party and office holders.
I don't know if they're leaders.
Are you able to tell from their speech whether or not they're intending to provide a message to the members of the far right-wing extremists?
No, of course not.
If I may explain my answer.
Let's just start off on small bits, and then I'll certainly give you a chance. So from what they're saying, so using the word fight, are you able to tell if they're intending to speak with far-right extremists?
No, absolutely not.
And it'd be fair to say that you can infer that they're not intending to speak with far-right extremists because they tend towards a different side of the political spectrum. Would that be fair to say?
I wouldn't necessarily want to make that kind of inference on limited information, but I understand.
Oh, you finally woke up. He
Would it
didn't
be
realize
fair
he
to
was being
say
screwed
that
before.
in order to understand whether they're, well, let me back up. Can you tell from what they're saying whether or not the members of the far right-wing extremists would view that as a communication to them?
10-second clips? Absolutely not.
You'd need more context, correct?
More information, more context.
And what is some of that more information you'd need?
Is it Trump?
You'd want to look at past communication patterns. You want to understand the historical context between the speaker and whatever.
When did
The
Trump order violence before this? When did he ever order violence before?
Information from that culture's perspective. In our case,
Because
right
our
wing
left culture
extremists
is very
and how
peaceful.
they receive messages and
He's going to get
particular
decimated for
place
this
that
answer.
specific person.
He
So
thinks he's
it's
walking his
a
way
number
out
of
of it.
different
This
types of
lawyer,
information you
Gessel,
want to
is
be able to
gonna
more
skewer
fully
it.
assess and try and identify whether there's any patterns.
Okay.
that are present.
Let's play a little bit more. I'm guessing your answers are going to be the same, but we're going to go through this.
Okay.
Harass them. Play harass.
Maxine Waters.
Yeah.
Did you answer the same for those five?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Let's just finish the clip, and I'll ask you a few more questions at the end of this clip, okay?
Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, nobody thinks Bernie means violence. Dude couldn't. Oh God, he means it. Can't hear her. She's crazy.
Political revolution. That means that millions have got to stand up and fight.
Jesus, now I'm thinking he should be indicted.
Continue fight back in the fight. We're fighting back.
My fight to fight administration.
Get out there what you don't fight for.
We'll also fight him and challenge him in every way that we can.
Fight in Congress, fight in the courts, fight in the streets.
This is great.
In the courts and in the streets, there's the fight, there's the fight, and then there's the fight to defend.
We're people who can't on this fight.
Fight in the streets is good.
Have to fight. That in this fight, in this fight. I want to talk, so
We keep focused.
We will fight, but we must fight. We've been fighting, and we need to fight, but we also need to fight.
This is going to be a question.
must fight.
We're the fight of our lives.
We're going to be fighting our life. This is the fight of our life. Fight for their lives.
We are in this fight for
Okay, it's getting a little long. Okay, we got.
No, I wanted to keep it. They could play it for like 40. This is what they. This is
Okay.
what they all say.
You heard a few speakers in there say we're going to take the fight to the streets. Do you remember hearing that?
What
Amongst
a right-wing extremist.
two of them, I believe, said that.
Okay, I trust your characterization.
You don't want me to play that whole thing again, do you?
I'd rather not.
Okay. So there's a couple of speakers that said
Devastating for my case.
we're going to take the fight to the streets.
Metaphor.
If they were at a rally with far right-wing extremists in it,
You should say far left also.
and they used the term fight, and we're going to take the fight to the streets, would those far right-wing extremists interpret that as a call to violence?
Flame emojis around his face right now.
Relationship with the speaker that involved a history of that speaker promoting and endorsing violence. Before and after violent incidents had occurred, had developed a relationship, signaling various things that were important to that community, that culture, signaling things in terms of their support for various grievances, using language representing threats as existential in nature and requiring violent action. If all of those things were present, then yeah, quite possibly they would interpret.
Okay. And if those things weren't present, it's unlikely they would interpret those terms fight and take the fight to the streets as a call to violence, correct?
It's always hard to predict, take something out of the equation again, that if you're just saying in isolation one thing, and if that one thing's not present, then yeah, that would make sense that it would have a substantial influence in terms of a lack of action. That might not take it.
That's me. So let me give you a hypothetical.
Okay.
Let's say there's a speaker, say one of those speakers in there that says,
Yeah, awesome.
we're
Thank
going
you,
to fight like hell and we're going to take the fight to the streets. That's what they say. And they say that at a big rally, and that rally has far-right extremists in it.
This guy's getting paid $300 an hour.
Promoting violence, at least none that the right-wing speakers know of. And they don't have any perceived relationship with the far right-wing extremists. So they don't have those two factors. Would that be considered a call to violence?
What are the other contextual factors present? I mean, that would make a big difference too. So again, some of these hypotheticals, when they're asked without enough information, it's hard for me to answer that question. It would depend on
What
the
about
context
far
of
left
that
extremists?
speech that's being given. Why were they saying certain things? What was it related to?
Related to the 2016 election, far left extremists.
Even with a lack of information, you could still imagine that an audience would receive a certain calls to action in a particular way.
It's just verbal diarrhea. That's it.
Let's take a look at a few more videos.
Let's take a look at a few more. Maxine Waters, you got to get in their faces and harass them.
Provide a little more context, but perhaps not enough. So we'll talk about that.
I haven't seen AOC though. I'd like to see her. But we agree. This expert, I mean, an expert in far right extremism. He's a sociologist.
A sociopath.
There you
There
go.
you go.
Yeah. Get in their faces. Like a
Okay. Stop that right there.
God, she's awful.
She really is called
So you
for
see a
violence.
woman in there, and I'll represent you that she's a congresswoman.
You get in their faces and
she's
you
speaking to the crowd,
absolutely
and she's telling
harass them.
the crowd to push back and make people not feel welcome there, and people are cheering her on. Is that a call to violence, or would you need additional contextual information?
It would, one of the factors that would be important in terms of additional contextual information is there are there
History.
individuals and groups present in the audience that have known violence.
So even if they're overtly calling for it, it's not violence. It's not called for violence.
Political extremism. Saying, making a statement like that with a crowd that has that known history is different than saying those things in a crowd where that's not present.
Okay. So this is Congressman Waters. She may or may not know if people have that history or who have that history in that crowd.
Okay.
So you're saying, well, maybe it's a call to violence if there are people with that history in the crowd, and maybe it's not a call to violence if there's people without that history in the crowd. Is that a fair characterization?
And that would be one aspect. We're only talking about one aspect, though.
So what other aspects would I need?
Go back to what we just discussed, which is the history in terms of relationship between the speaker and members of the audience.
Okay, great. Let's go. Let's look at number 147.
Well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You sure you just want to smack us 2K at one time? Just one time.
But thank you, Liz.
Can't solve the city president this morning.
2020 presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren.
Okay. So they're joking about smacking people there, and she's laughing at it. Does that give you enough context to know whether or not that would be perceived as an endorsement of or a call to violence?
No, it really doesn't. I mean, again, it's a fairly short clip. I'm not familiar with the speakers as far as the.
I don't know.
There's just not much contextual information for me to say much about.
Okay.
He really is playing.
Let's look at number 1048, please.
This is such a great cross.
Isn't that?
You lured me in, Joe.
Isn't she one of the first Native American congresswomen?
Yes. Yes.
Ooh, let's hear this one.
Chuck Schumer saying to attack the Supreme Court.
You know what's at stake? Over the last 3 years, women's reproductive rights have come under attack in a way we haven't seen in modern history. From Louisiana to Missouri to Texas, Republican legislatures are waging a war on women, all women, and they're taking away fundamental rights. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
Unleash the whirlwind.
You won't know what hit you.
Pay the price.
If you go forward with these awful.
You won't know what hit you.
Okay. Let's talk about that one a little bit. You know who that is speaking, or do you understand the context behind that?
I know who the speaker is.
Okay. And you understand the context that was involved in a debate with respect to abortion and the possibility of the United States Supreme Court issuing a decision.
Yes, that's my understanding based on what I saw.
Okay. Did you have a pre-existing understanding before looking at this video?
This particular clip?
Yeah.
No, I did not.
Okay. So you heard Senator Schumer. He talked about how women are coming under attack, how people are waging war on them, and taking fundamental rights. Is that language characteristic of some of the language used by far right-wing extremists? I'm not saying he is one, but does it have the same characteristics of some of the language used by far right-wing extremists?
One of the things I would want to know more about in order to more fully answer your question would be the history of the speaker's use of the term war and whether there's evidence basically that suggests that the speaker really believes that a literal war is taking place and that some type of action is required, or whether the speaker is using a more kind of figurative type of term.
Totally innocuous.
Without that information, then it's really hard to assess.
It's really hard to get to the conclusion I want to get to.
Okay. Does the speaker using the phrase, "we're coming under attack," does that create a sense of self-defense and does that create a sense of self-defense among the listeners?
It could. Again,
Okay.
How the history of the speaker's use of the term and their understanding of the terms, how they've used it in the past, whether they've used it in the past. These would all be important, kind of, again, contextual factors.
And whether or not I like it.
You can't really tell just looking at the words.
I don't think there's a social scientist in the world that would say you can take just words at face value. Context is always important.
I thought he was doing that.
He
Let's
walks
take a look
everything
at
out of context,
1054,
in a
please.
morphed context.
Has his tie become looser under the pressure, or did it start off like
It
that?
started there. He's a slob.
National press talking about Trump's behavior.
Take him up back.
But what he said he did is a textbook definition of sexual assault. And think about this. But it's more than that. He said, because I'm famous, because I'm a star, because
Oh God, he's getting passionate.
I can do things other people can't. What a disgusting assertion for anyone to make. The press always asks me, don't I wish I were debating you? No, I wish you were in high school, I could take you behind the gym. That's what I wish.
Okay. So, when I believe he was President Joe Biden, he may have not been president yet at that clip. But at the time, I'll call him President Joe Biden, although I don't know the time, out of respect. At the time he made that comment, could or would that have been interpreted by far right-wing extremists as a call to violence?
So I wanted to ask about far left also.
One of the contextual factors in looking at that statement is he said, I wish I were in high school. So, I think is an important aspect of the statement in terms of understanding. Would far right
So let me interrupt you a second. Couldn't him saying, I wish you were in high school, be treated as a case of plausible deniability, almost like a joke to mask his violent tendencies?
That's possible. Again, with
Okay.
more context, we can make.
That's what he said every time Trump said peacefully or something.
So it would require context to understand whether he's engaged in, is that double speak or front back behavior? Double speak.
But front and backstage would have other application.
Okay. So we would need context to understand whether one of those two methods of communication were to apply.
Yeah, I hate to sound like a broken record. We want to know whether there was a relationship between Joe Biden and far right extremists,
What's-
such that there had been a pattern developed where you would have far right extremists who would understand certain things in a certain way based on the speaker's words.
Okay, great. I'm not going to subject you to any more of these types of videos, so thank you very much for that. Let me move on.
He wants to take him up back in the school to look for Hunter Biden's gun, by the way. If that's what.
I want to go to the,
I wanted to ask if
there's a demonstrative exhibit picture you use, picture number 4.
I might have to duck out. I'll duck back
You
out
wanna
in and
look
out
at that?
if I have to go.
Yes, I do.
Okay. I want you to look at that picture on the left.
Okay.
I'm guessing, and I'm wondering if this is your opinion as well, that those are two people fighting. Does that look like two people fighting?
When you say two people, you're referring to on my left, a person in a kind of light blue colored shirt that's holding the flag that appears to be as a weapon, using it as a weapon.
And the person in the green,
The
correct?
person in the green.
Okay.
To me,
Or
it
he's
appears
pulling
that
it away
person
from the other
in blue
guy.
is getting ready to, I guess you might say, stab the person in the green with the flagpole.
Or
Okay.
he's pulling.
And
or
the
it's
person,
going the opposite direction. He's pulling
well,
away
let's
from
look at those people. So the person in the blue has a helmet, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And the person in the green has a gas mask on.
It appears to be, yes.
Yeah. So it looks as though maybe they both prepared for violence. Would that be fair to say?
I think that's fair.
Okay. And the person in the blue, and I see what you're saying. It looks as though that person's preparing to stab, but I had wondered, it'd be fair to, it could be that that person in the blue had just,
Yank the flag
was
away.
pulling the flag away from the person
That's
in
what
the
it
green
looks like to me.
trying to
People don't
grab
put a
it.
hand
The
up
person in
towards the
green's
stabbing flag.
their arms are outstretched, right?
Yeah, it appears that way.
Okay, so it could be that they're, and I don't know if it is, but they could be trying to pull it away from the person in the green. That's a fair interpretation of that photo, isn't it?
That's fair in this particular photo. I will
Yeah.
say that.
Well, let's just stick with the photo. I'll let you explain. I'm not going to entirely cut you
Sure,
off.
sure.
And it could be that the person in the blue is preparing to try and stab the person in the green, or hit the person in the green with that flagpole, and the person in the green is sort of reaching out to defend themselves. Could that be the case?
Yes.
That could be the case. And it could be maybe that the person in the green has swung that flagpole and the person in the blue caught it and the person in the green just released it. That could be an interpretation. That could have been what happened.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah. So from that photo, we're not really sure who's the
Aggressive.
instigator of the violence, whether it's the person in the green or the person in the blue, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And from what I could tell, just looking at the attire, I mean, the person in the blue, I didn't, see any like a 1776 emblem or Betsy Ross that we had talked about that would necessarily indicate that that person in the blue was or is a member of a far right-wing extreme group. I mean, is there some attire that, and it looks like it's a woman. I mean, it's she,
I don't
long
think it's
hair.
a
It looks
woman.
as though that in the back. I could be wrong. But you'd agree with me, there's nothing in that person's attire that signifies them as a far right-wing extremist.
I thought it was two
Other than
men.
The fact that they attended Unite the Right rally, which was attended by far right extremists.
Right.
It was
That's fair.
people on the
So-
left also.
So the context, where they're located, but not necessarily their attire themselves.
You know,
Okay.
Some people at Unite the Right had more kind of group-specific attire. Many others did not. That was pretty common.
And you'd agree with me, same with the person in the green. There's nothing necessarily in their attire that signifies that they're a far right-wing extremist or a member of that group. You
I'm not
agree
sure
with
where
me on
he's
that?
going, but I have confidence in him.
Okay. So you had talked about, we can turn that off for a second.
You did say I could explain a little bit. Is that-
All right, I'll let you explain. Go ahead.
The reason I selected that photo is because dozens of people were assaulted by far-right extremists that day.
No, no one was assaulted by far left.
Okay.
That's documented.
Okay, and so you selected that photo?
To be representative of the type of violence that happened at Unite the Right that was committed by far-right extremists.
Okay. Now, did you attend that rally?
No, I did not.
Were you observer of the rally?
No, I was in Montreal at the time.
Okay. So you were out of the country during the rally.
Correct.
Let's talk about you talked a little bit about the Million MAGA March, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And there was a video where a car that you said was President Trump's motorcade drove through it?
That's my understanding.
That was your understanding. And what's that understanding based on?
It's been documented in multiple places.
Okay. And the reason I asked that, I mean, I just saw one vehicle drive through. I mean, I guess in my experience, it seems though there's sort of a whole convoy usually.
I think we might have saw a little slightly different aspect.
Okay.
Several vehicles.
Okay. And you testified, if I remember correctly, that the vehicle went through, and then after that, violence broke out.
No, that wasn't my testimony.
How did I misunderstand that?
The way you're characterizing now, it sounds like it kind of almost immediately broke out at some point later.
Oh, at some point later. Okay, I'm sorry. I was just trying to get the sequence right. I didn't mean to imply that it was immediate. Okay. So the vehicle drove through, people cheered it, and then at some point later, violence broke out.
Correct.
Okay. And did you attend that event?
No, I did not.
Okay. Now, you also, there was a tweet in which President Trump said that Antifa, I think he called them scum, but he said Antifa attacked and they were driven off, and then later other people attacked. Do you remember that tweet?
I do.
Okay. And I remember your testimony very clearly because I tend to do a fair amount of writing. I mean, that's all that lawyers produce is words and hot air. And so I'm always sort of keenly attuned to the passive tense.
Okay.
And you said that after President Trump's motorcade drove through, sometime later, it turned violent. Were you there to witness who instigated violence?
I was not present at that event.
Okay. Is it your testimony that members of far-right extremists started attacking people?
It's my testimony that members of far-right extremist groups like the Proud Boys committed acts of violence that day.
Okay. Is it your testimony that they were defending themselves from an attack from Antifa?
It's my testimony that President Trump framed it that way in the tweet.
Okay. But we don't, at this point, I should say at this point,
You don't know.
where you are now, you don't know who may have started the violence.
My understanding is that certainly some of the members of the Proud Boys instigated the violence.
What's that understanding
Some
based on?
were, arrests made and so forth. So
And what's that understanding based on?
Oh, look at that. I asked this question.
documents.
And I guess the reason I'm asking is I didn't see a public document in your expert report that would indicate who caused any of that violence.
Whoops.
I mean, I'd have to review my report.
Whoops. Show he's a hack without calling him a hack.
Did the guy say that he was in Montreal?
Let's
Yeah.
talk about that Million MAGA march.
Hope this guy better invest
President
his
Trump
35,000.
organized that march. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And he didn't invite the speakers to it, did he?
No, I did not.
And he did not invite who attended to it. He didn't invite the attendees, did he?
That's correct.
The only thing he did was drive through it, correct?
Presidential motorcade, correct.
Okay.
Can you distinguish the feds from the citizens in that video?
Let me ask you another question. So there was another video. I think it's number 73. I'm just going to play a portion of it to remind you. I'm not quite even sure how to describe it. All right, let's just put it on pause there. So you remember talking about this video?
Yes, I do.
And you said that that was posted on the Donald.win.
Donald Win, yeah,
Donald.win website.
Yeah, it's a website of sorts. It originally started as a subreddit and then got mirrored and turned into more of a website.
Okay. But that's not President Trump's official website, is it?
That's correct.
And it's not his personal website. And
That's correct.
there's no evidence that he put it on there, is it?
No, I didn't testify to that.
No.
He knows
And you
about it.
testified that there was some traffic or other postings or conversations on that website?
A substantial amount. These are large sites that have, for years, had a substantial amount of extremist, right-wing, far-right extremist posts, including ones of violent nature.
And there's no post on that website from Donald Trump, is there?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. In fact, there's no evidence that President Trump's even aware of that website, is there?
I mean, I'm not inside Donald Trump's mind in terms of
Evident.
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
sites, but I can tell you that as indicated in the report, that there was a specific situation in terms of some of Trump's advisors, staff, that involved some of the posts on that particular site as it related to January 6th. And certainly there were a number of posts that specifically addressed plans to commit violence on January 6th.
Now, was one of those posts by Steve Bannon? You had mentioned a post by comment by Steve Bannon. I don't remember if you said he had posted on that website or it was else.
No, when I referenced Steve Bannon, it was in regards to comments he had made about claiming victory no matter what the election results were.
Okay. And do you know the relationship between Steve Bannon and President Trump?
I know he served initially as his primary campaign manager, and then after Donald Trump was elected president, he served as a White House advisor. And that there, at least according to Steve Bannon, had maintained communication.
So Steve Bannon claims that he's maintained communication with President Trump.
I've heard in the public record him make statements in regards to that.
Okay. Would it surprise you to learn that President Trump had fired Steve Bannon?
No, I recall that.
Okay. And do you recall President Trump saying Steve Bannon has nothing to do with me or my presidency? When he was fired, he not only lost his job, he lost his mind. Do you remember President Trump saying that?
I do recall that.
Okay. So you remember President Trump disavowing Steve Bannon, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So let's go back to the sort of speech pattern. So you're talking about relationships and whatnot. So if President Trump were to rally, and we saw, I think where there was a protester or something, and he says, "Get that person out of there." That could be considered a call to violence if there's far right-wing extremists in that group. Is that?
It's literally attempted murder.
Yeah.
Literally.
Especially if it's part of a pattern.
Part of a pattern.
But
Every part of your pattern is being unraveled.
Okay. And then if he said, "Get that person out of here,"
murder.
and then like a few seconds or after a pause said, "But don't hurt him,"
Plausible deniability.
would that "but don't hurt him" in your view be plausible deniability?
It certainly could be. Yes, again, we'd have to look at the
Totally
specific
plausible.
instances in
Totally.
context, but that statement could serve certainly as a means of establishing plausible deniability.
And if he says, "I really mean do not hurt him," do not, is that plausible deniability?
And so I'm going to give you a well, let me ask you. So let's say President Trump said, "Get that person out of here, but don't hurt him." And then members of the crowd push that person out and rough them up a bit, injure them a little bit.
Like I said, murder already. Come on.
Would that change your opinion?
I'm sorry.
Would that, in your view, if President Trump said, "Get that person out of here," and then shortly after said, "But don't hurt him," and members of the crowd interpreted that to get the person out, to physically, forcibly remove that person,
Including assaulting the person.
And that person was hurt, injured. So
By means of assault.
by means of those, yeah, exactly what those people did.
Okay.
Would you view President Trump's comments as a call to violence?
I would view.
I need more information.
That's quite good. The previous question was about plausible deniability.
I understand. I'll first ask you, would you view that as a call to violence?
Within context, if there's a pattern established, if there's an endorsement for violence.
Can't answer with an if.
Certainly that would fit that pattern.
Okay. And then if he said, but don't hurt him, would
means
that
hurt
be an
him.
example of plausible deniability?
If there was an after-the-fact endorsement.
You
of
testified
violence
about this on
occurred,
direct. What do you mean
then
if?
certainly that would give credence to interpreting the statement that you just mentioned as an effort to create plausible deniability.
Okay. But I'm not going to give you that part of the hypothetical. I'm just going to say that President Trump said, get him out of here,
Don't hurt him.
and then said, but don't hurt him. And that there was a crowd, and the crowd, in fact, reacted, at least some members of that crowd, reacted with violence. They forcibly put that person out there. Okay. Is the phrase, but don't hurt him, is that plausible deniability? That's all we have to go on.
Well, you may not like the answer, but it depends. It's going to depend on.
You testified
context.
about this on direct.
Depend on
It depends on who's paying him.
one isolated example as a hypothetical with small bits of information. It's difficult to know exactly how these things should be interpreted or would be interpreted.
Okay. But in your view, there's a possibility that it could be interpreted as a call to violence plus plausible deniability. There's a possibility that that could be the case.
Yes.
Okay.
It could be with a side order of insurrection.
Eva's got better hair.
I just got a knot in the back of it. I'm looking to see where the knot went. Here, let's pull out a bunch of hairs.
Okay.
Oh,
So I want to draw your attention to January,
I could spend the
January
rest of the
6th.
afternoon just listening to this.
or the events leading up to and surrounding January 6th.
Wonderful cross.
So
It's
you
sad that it's
testified about a
such
number of tweets, and one of the tweets that you testified was President Trump tweeting, come to January 6th,
will be wild.
will be wild. You remember that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And when I say come to January 6th, I'm paraphrasing that. But he was trying to drum up support, and the last part he said, will be wild, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Was that phrase, will be wild, a call to violence?
Oh, shit. Oh, no. Hey, Joe, bring this up if you could. Hold on.
I'm giving you the tweet. I can bring it up again if you want.
Not necessary.
Okay. Was that tweet in and of itself a call to violence?
Hey, everyone, come get your call to violence shirt.
For foreign extremists, they wouldn't understand it in and of itself. They would understand it
Hashtag joking.
better. And in that respect, certainly it was interpreted that way as a call to violence.
Okay. So, knowing what you know of all of President Trump's and the far right-wing extremists, their respective activities leading up to the day where he said, will be wild, your testimony is that the far right-wing extremists certainly interpreted that as a call to action. Okay.
And that was his intention to get that.
Was it, do you have evidence that it was President Trump's intention to call them to action?
Well, they did it.
Your opinion is not addressing that issue.
There's no evidence for my opinion.
Evidence. Who needs that?
About the patterns. that have been
Patterns. I see patterns.
built in other scholars as it relates to issues in terms of far-right extremism in these issues. I can tell you what I've observed in terms of patterns specifically related to President Trump and his relationship with far-right extremists.
Okay. So your testimony today, then, it's fair to say, is really sort of limited to how far right-wing extremists interpreted President Trump's remarks.
It's referencing that, but it's also certainly part of observing a pattern. It's not just observing what far-right extremists do, but also what the speaker, the sender of the message is doing too. And so that's part of the pattern. The pattern is not just far-right extremists and their response, but also the messages that are being sent. The things that-
We need a shirt that says "I see patterns" with Bruce Willis. I see patterns everywhere.
And what you just said is that it's beyond your opinion today as to whether or not Trump intentionally sought to mobilize people to violence on January 6th. Is that right to say?
This is the key.
I can say that he
Accidentally.
a consistent pattern of messages over time that encouraged violence. He expressed messages over time that endorsed violence. And that's very, I think clear in terms of this pattern.
Patterns.
Okay.
Okay.
On January 6th, you saw his speech, and you saw where he said, go down there and march peacefully and patriotically to the Capitol. Remember that part of the speech?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And your testimony is that or your conclusion, and tell me if I'm wrong here, your conclusion is that the far right wing extremists interpreted that to be plausible deniability because of this past history and because your belief that President Trump had aggressive language that outweighed the peacefully and patriotic statement. Those two factors, the history and the outweighing of the peaceful and patriotic. Is that correct?
Those are two, very critical factors. I think that's a fair characterization.
Daniel,
Get him a body bag.
And the aggressive language had to do with going down there and fighting and that type of phrase.
As well as the existential threat type of language, you might say, as well as the reference to essentially a different set of rules applying. So it was the aggressive language in terms of the references to fight, which number of times, 20 times, but also some of these other things I just pointed to as well.
Okay. But at the end of the day, you don't, like you said, you don't know what was actually going through President Trump's head.
Not in President Trump's mind.
Okay.
he doesn't have a Twitter account. This guy's a Fed.
Yeah, I think he is.
I'm looking. He's got a very, very minimal social media footprint. Dr. Peter Simi.
That would be interesting. Have you ever taken money from the federal government?
Well, that's no joke. Ask him if he knows what Fed posting is. I hope they're not going to see this in time. Sir, do you know what Fed posting is? Have you ever worked for the federal government?
One other question about plausible deniability. If I heard you correctly, so if one of the characteristics, be fair to say, of plausible deniability is that the speaker only makes that denying statement once. And it's a different matter if the speaker makes that denying statement multiple times in a speech.
That could make a difference. This is all contextual, so
Contextual means if Trump says it,
statement,
he's studying insurrection
portion
because
the
that's what Trump.
specific efforts at plausible deniability kind of consisted of. There's just a lot of factors we have to take into consideration.
Okay. So it'd probably be fair to sum up your testimony as saying, look, when someone makes certain comments or speeches, to understand the impact of that speech, you need to understand not just the words that are used, but the contextual factors, of which there can be many. Is that fair to say?
Very fair.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
Dude, I think I just found his CV online.
Yeah, I found his CV also.
Seems to he's got some experience with the FBI in there, but
Your Honor,
We'd like to dismiss all charges.
admit the videos I played, 10, 46, 47, 48, 54, and 74. Not for the truth of the matter that those people wanted to fight, but obviously as a basis for the witness's testimony
do
here.
you remember the rule that they had in the Alex Jones trial about completeness of documents that they wouldn't allow in? And here that one exhibit is a splice of multiple videos. Forget the rule of completeness here.
Well, it would have to be asserted by the opposing party. So
No,
if there's no objection, then it comes in the way it is.
I heard Joe saying earlier they should be objecting.
Yeah.
146, 147, 1046. I'm sorry. Let me get to the speaker. Numbers 1046, 1047, 1048, 1054, and 1074.
Oh, good. You can count.
This is a weaponization of our justice system against the people and the political.
Yeah,
absolutely.
This is banana republic stuff.
Because it's only because he's talking to the far right. That's what makes it. And the far right is so uniquely dangerous. That's
But it's
Dr. Simi, do you have enough water?
nope.
the oceans don't have enough water.
I want to start by talking about the patterns of Trump's behavior that you referenced in your conversations with
Patterns.
Mr. Gessler. And
Who is this guy?
This is the plaintiff's attorney, no?
Yeah.
Plaintiff
to
is
help
the-
us keep track, I want to put some on the flip chart here. Can you see that, or need to scoot it over a little bit further for you to be able to see it?
I think I should be able to see it. Some of it's blocked a little bit.
All right. Well, let's.
That's perfect.
Is that better?
What are they looking at? Oh, the chart.
Yeah, there are always different charts. So you should keep showing him.
Your Honor, can you see it? Okay.
The vast right wing conspiracy.
It's a picture of. It's okay.
I hesitate to ask, but Mr. Gessler.
Picture of Hunter Biden.
Do I need to?
Okay, thank you. So I want to talk about a pattern, and I want to do that by sort of using the list you put in your report as a frame for this discussion. And if you could turn to page 18 of your report, and I have it here, and we're not going to sort of read everything here, but I want to bring up some of the sources you cite for this pattern in your report and talk about
Okay,
them,
drinking game
by one.
pattern.
And you see here in this, we see at the bottom, this November 2015. I think we've talked about that already, right? We showed that video.
Yes, that's correct.
I can show it if you want. That'd be helpful.
The pattern.
Okay.
The pattern of his hair kind
This
of looks
is the
like
one
devil
where
horns.
we saw both Trump told them
I'm out. I'll be listening.
to get the protester the hell out of there,
Come on,
and then the next day he said, well, maybe the protester should have been roughed up, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so would this be a data point in your pattern?
Most definitely.
Okay, so I'm going to put here 2015. And to help us remember, I'm just going to put a couple of phrases from each incident, if we could. What would you use as like a 2 or 3 word phrase?
Roughed up.
Roughed up, okay. And you see the next example there is 2000.
This is a different version of what we have on the screen.
This is the revised report.
All right, we'll double check.
Okay,
Sorry.
no, it's fine. But you want to take a minute to make sure you have the right thing?
Why don't you just keep, we'll look while you're doing
Okay.
it. If there's a problem, we'll give you a shot.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
The next example you give is February 2016. You see that?
Yes, I do.
And then at the bottom, there's a footnote, and this is dangerous to do, but you see the footnote says, knock the crap out of tomato source, and there's a link to Washington Post.
Yes, I see that.
All right, well, let's watch that video and see what Trump says.
In case you see the security guys, we have wonderful security guys. They said, Mr. Trump, there may be somebody with tomatoes in the audience. So if you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, would you? Seriously.
That time he meant it.
Okay? Just knock the hell. I promise you, I will pay for the legal fees. I promise. I promise. There won't be so much because the courts agree with us too. What's going on in this country?
Okay.
So just out of curiosity,
This is another example in your pattern
Yeah.
of Trump's
legal.
calling for violence in the speeches.
That would be a call
Okay.
to
What phrase should we use to remember this one by?
Yeah.
not the credit.
Okay.
Somebody's about to throw something at somebody else, and you hit them. That's a defense of others.
This
Isn't
was
that a self-defense?
2016, correct?
Correct.
If you see somebody about to hit somebody, hit them first to prevent them from hurting somebody. That's a call to, that's like a explicit enunciation to defend others. That, you
And
know,
if we
that is
look
not asking
back
for
at
an
your
illegal
report,
act.
we see
It's also called hyperbole.
same example. The next
wow.
one
Not just
about
hearsay.
in February 16 about punch him in the
Let's
face.
just
You
have
see
a
that?
whole bunch of hearsays in one.
And you see a footnote 74. There's a
where you
YouTube
came out
link
with all
there.
Yes, I said that.
All right. Well, let's watch that YouTube link.
Look, see, he's smiling. See, he's having a good time. I love the old days, you know? You know what I hate? There's a guy totally disruptive, throwing punches. We're not allowed to punch back anymore. I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks. That's true. You know, I love our police, and I really respect our police, and they're not getting enough. They're not. But honestly, I hate to see that. Here's a guy throwing punches, nasty as hell, screaming and everything else when we're talking. And he's walking out, and we're not allowed, you know, the guards are very gentle with him. He's walking out like a big high five, smiling, laughing. I'd like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
That sounds like such a unreasonable response.
The quickest way from a billion places.
To a
If
violent
you
person.
remember, every Trump rally, there were endless.
How would
leftist
you?
people
This was in
disrupting,
2016.
disrupting.
What catchphrase should
That's
we
okay.
use
No
for this
problem
one?
there.
Part of the pattern.
That's not disruption of our democracy.
No.
Well, there may be another one that involves punch. Can we say maybe punch in the face?
Sure.
This is such an assault
Now,
on freedom of speech. It's such a blatant
If we
assault
go back
on
to your
freedom of
report,
It's sad.
you
So tell
see
me-
Oh, it's his own report, this.
you have another example from March 2016. Oh, sorry, we don't have a video for that one. So let's go to the next page, page 20. I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. I had my notes one from 2000. Oh, here we go. From October 2018. You see that one?
Yes, I do.
All right, and that is a New York Times link, right? In the footnote?
Yes, it is.
All right, well, let's look and see what that link says.
There's a credible source.
Oh,
Real quick, how do you kindly answer it?
Your Honor, I thought I got rid of all the ads. I apologize. But give me 7 seconds.
Your Honor, we want to see all the ads.
We've all been there waiting for the ads.
And by the way, never wrestle him. You understand? Never. Any guy that can do a body slam, he's my guy.
Yeah, they should show the clip from the WWE where he wrestles, and they say, "Look, he's violent."
It's nothing to be wrestled. So I was in Rome with a lot of the leaders from other countries, talking about all sorts of things, and I heard about it. And we endorsed Greg very early, but I had heard that he body slammed a reporter.
He'll do that in his closing
And he
statement.
was way up. And he was way up. And
It's a
I
bench
said,
trial, not a
this is
jury
like the
trial.
day of the election or just before. And I said, oh, this is terrible. He's going to lose the election. Then I said, well, wait a minute. I know Montana pretty well. I think it might help him. And it did.
Is this another example of the work that you reviewed in your report about Donald Trump's pattern of praising political violence?
This is embarrassing.
Okay.
Why do we even have this trial? This is freaking ridiculous. What are we doing here?
The risk of doing it live. What should we use for that catchphrase?
Body slam.
Great.
This is so sad. And he's going to basically use all these catchphrases and say, so the body slam.
Now,
and the...
I want to go to, we talked about a little bit at the end of our conversation.
That's how you establish your pattern, right?
Stand back and stand by comment that Trump made. Do you remember when he made that comment to the Proud Boys? Should I pull the video up?
Oh, yes, I remember.
When was it?
Well, it's at the debate, so I don't have the exact date off the top.
This is why.
Okay, well, I'll pull the slide up so we can just make sure we all get it right on the demonstrative.
This is such a train wreck, such a abhorrent thing of justice. I appreciate the fact you're covering
Does
this.
seeing the slide help you remember when the stand back, stand by comment was made?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
September 29th.
Okay. Do you need to see the video or are we good?
No, I don't.
Okay. And can I put stand back, stand by here?
Yeah.
We don't even know what the hell that meant. Stand by for what? Stand by and watch me win the election?
And when did like associations become criminal or disqualifying? So basically the whatever your
And then,
group is, you get
another
to
event in 2020 that we talked about on direct, but I want to provide some more context based
Keep
on
showing this
the
video.
conversation that you had with Mr.
This is
Gessler
some
about
rhino
what
yelling at Trump this video.
we can infer from Trump's patterns. We played a short excerpt of this video. Do you remember that with your thing?
Yes, I do.
And I'd like to play the whole video. But before I do that, can you just remind us again what was important about Trump's response to the statement by the Georgia election worker to stop calling for violence? What was important about Trump's response?
I would say two things. One, there's an omission of any kind of clear condemnation to threats of violence or acts of violence. And there's a doubling down as it relates to the very specific issue that's being referenced in terms of what's inspiring people to threaten the lives of election workers and election officials.
Okay. Well, I'm going to play the full exhibit. It's admitted, Your Honor. It's P126. And thanks for bearing with me while we switch back between programs.
It's such a ridiculous thing. What are we doing here? You're going to disqualify a presidential candidate?
I'll start at the beginning.
It's all gone too far. All of it. Joe General today asked for Chris Krebs, a patriot who ran CISA, to be shot. A 20-something tech in Gwinnett County today has death threats and a noose put out saying he should be hung for treason because he was transferring a report on batches from an EMS to a county computer so we could read it. It has to stop.
So his failure to say don't commit violence, that is triggering far right to engage in violence.
You do not condemn this language or these actions. This has to stop. We need you to step up, and if you're taking a position of leadership, show some. My boss, Secretary Raffensperger, his address is out there. They've had people doing caravans from their house. They've had people come onto their property. Trisha, his wife of 40 years, is getting sexualized threats through her cell phone. It has to stop. This is elections. This is the backbone of democracy. And all of you who have not said a damn word are complicit in this. I can't begin to explain the level of anger I have right now over this. And every American, every Georgian, Republican and Democrat alike should have that same level of anger.
You're a joke.
Mr. President, it looks like you likely lost the state of Georgia. We're investigating. There's always a possibility I get it. You have the right to do it for the courts. What you don't have the ability to do, and you need to step up and say this, is stop inspiring people to commit potential acts of violence.
Which he isn't. You're a joke for claiming he is.
Some of them get killed. And it's not right.
Whenever I make threats, I always have a sign language
And
interpreter.
I want to turn back to President Trump's response.
So his response doesn't say go ahead, do violence. It basically
I'm
says
just
that you're a
completely
jackass.
lost. What the
On the
hell
right-hand
is
side
this
of the
case
screen
about?
reads, "That's
What are
right."
we watching? This is insanity that this is in
President
our
Trump
court.
at all do anything to discourage
Failure
his
to
followers
discourage
from
is now
committing those acts
inciting
of violence
so he can't be
after
president.
being specifically
It's just
identified, specifically
lunacy.
requested, and with specific examples given of the harm that was being caused. You do anything to stop that.
Oh,
No, you know, there was an assault over here, and I didn't hear you denounce.
I know
it.
you're not a mind reader,
Joe. You know,
but
I'm going to hold you accountable.
Obviously.
is
You
it
aren't- you don't
consistent
deny that
with
assault
someone
happened.
who wants their followers to behave peacefully
Oh, shut up.
to give this response to a specific request for help?
Not at all.
Yeah, because this guy was a cuck.
I want to put this example on our chart, and our chart so far focuses on words that Trump has used. So what catchphrase should we use for this Mr. Sterling plea for help and Trump's response?
Well, thank you, Harley girl. That's very thoughtful.
Maybe help.
You all should like
Again,
and subscribe.
I want to focus on Trump, is what we have here. So what language?
No condemnation.
No condemnation. Okay.
How dare he not condemn them?
Remember when the media kept asking over and over the same question? Do you condemn? Do you condemn? He was like, I condemned. I
I put
condemned.
Georgia underneath to help us
50
remember.
million times. Then finally, he doesn't do it. I didn't condemn.
To answer your question, to be fair, this is within the scope of cross because there's a whole he was relying on his pattern, so now he's helping establish what that pattern.
And the last
and as weak as
thing
this
I'd like to
pattern
talk
is,
about on this demonstrative
and it
is
transparently weak.
the ellipse speech on January
But it is
2021.
I would say, if
And-
I was a judge,
and-
I would say this is within the scope of cross.
In your conversation with Mr. Gessler, I noticed it. I'm sure it was a mistake or a paraphrase by his part, but he said that Mr. Trump said in that speech to go march peacefully. Did he say those words or did he say something different?
It was something different.
Okay. Was it a
Patriotic.
command at all?
It was not a command.
Okay. I can play the speech. You remember exactly what it was? We can play the speech if it's helpful.
If it's possible. to
Yeah, we can do that.
Always only on the rights. And I want to ask you when you get a break, Steve, about the cross and his failure to ask.
I'm going to
about
get close, but
nothing
not perfect. So we'll start a little before when it happens.
And your thoughts on that? Because he was very purposefully only asking about the right.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't. We will
Oh,
never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. We don't concede when there's death involved. Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore, and that's what this is all about. Because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election. We want to go back and we want to get
Let's
this
jump.
right. Because
And
we're
then
gonna have somebody in there that should not be in there, and our country will be destroyed, and we're not going to stand for that. And we're going to
Jump.
have to fight much harder. Now it is up to Congress to confront this egregious assault.
Fight, 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 fight.
After this, we're gonna walk
Hypocrisy.
down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the
Don't quit,
Capitol,
Jenny.
because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
So was that a command?
Not in my opinion.
Okay. And how did that differ from the language that Trump used at the speech at 417 that afternoon?
The speech at 417 and the video would be much more consistent with commands.
Why is that?
Because they were directives. They were very specific directives in terms of going home. And they
Yeah,
were
I love the
repeated
PBS NewsHour comment on the bottom of the
I
scroll.
want to make sure we don't forget to put the ellipse speech on this demonstrative. What catchphrase should we use for the ellipse speech?
a lip speech.
Okay.
I have not been impressed by this
Now,
lawyer.
Dr. Simi, looking at these
His case is very thin.
patterns
So-
over and over of
He has a
Trump's
tougher fight.
use and acknowledgement of political violence, what does this tell you about his awareness of the effect of his language on his supporters?
It suggests that in terms of when encouragement and promotion of violence occurs, that people respond to that. And then it suggests an awareness on the speaker's part, in this case, Donald Trump, knowing that these acts of violence occur and is able to then basically endorse and affirm the violence. So that would be hard to do without an awareness.
I want to turn now and talk about a couple specific things that you, Mr. Gessler, talked about. You spent some time with him discussing Steve Bannon, right? You remember that? And as part of that conversation, you or he referenced sort of a plan to declare victory before the election. Do you remember that part of the conversation?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'd like to play that clip now. And this is, Your Honor, this is not admitted evidence. I want to have it used as demonstrative purposes to give more context to the conversation that he had with Mr. Gessler. And it's just an audio clip, so there's no video.
Trump's going to do is just declare victory, right? He's going to declare victory. But that doesn't mean he's going to. He's just going to say he's going to.
Well, I guess we have half of a video there. But Dr. Simi, what kind of relationship did Steve Bannon have with right-wing extremists?
Very close one.
And Mr. Gessler mentioned that Mr. Bannon was fired at some point by President Trump. But
Is that slanderous?
Pardon Steve Bannon?
That's my understanding.
Okay. And you talked about this fight for Trump. Oh, sorry. I know what's happening. My apologies. Trying to do too much at one time. I apologize. You see the fight for Trump on the screen?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And Mr. Gessler, I asked you a bunch of questions about the Donald.win and how Donald Trump didn't have anything to do with that. Remember that?
I do remember that. Yes.
Okay. But who tweeted this video to all of their followers?
Donald Trump.
And I want to talk, and this will be my last series of questions, about one more subject after this, about Trump's personal relationships with other leaders of right-wing extremism. Do you know who Roger Stone is? You talk about him in your report.
Yes, I do.
Objection. Assumes facts. Not
Who is Roger
evidence.
Stone?
He's a longtime advisor for Donald Trump.
He's characterizing Roger Stone as far right-wing extremist.
And who cares? Does that mean he doesn't have a political voice? Does that mean he can't
And,
speak? Does that mean it's what does that mean?
Relationship did Roger Stone have with right-wing extremism?
Called freedom of
Close one.
association.
How does he know this?
Been associated with Proud Boys for some number of years prior to the Capitol attack. Had a relationship with the Oath Keepers.
See, this is what I'm saying is Trump's attorneys are not objecting, and I really think that they have to be
You
like,
said he was a close
how the hell does he
advisor
know
of
this?
President Trump.
Oh yeah, they go golfing every week. How do you know?
Was Roger Stone in D.C. around January 6th?
That's my understanding.
Was he in D.C.
Did you
with
see
the
him
Proud
there, January
Boys
6th? This
around
is
January
so
6th?
stupid.
Proud Boys and Oath Keepers.
Oh my god.
And then
this is speculation.
lastly, you mentioned we saw some speeches from Alex Jones about 1776. And you talked about who he is. I want to talk about Alex Jones' relationship with President Trump.
How many times have they
Did President Trump appear on Alex Jones' radio show shortly after he announced his candidacy?
leading?
Yes, he did.
This
And have they had other connections over time?
Yes, they have.
Okay. And did Alex Jones, we saw speeches of him speaking.
I have two objections on this. One is this is leading questioning.
Thank you.
Second, this is far beyond the cross.
Yes. Now we're getting beyond the cross.
Seems like Jones is beyond the cross.
Okay. I was just, there was an effort to distance Mr. Trump from these right-wing extremist
He didn't
leaders.
say
And I was
Alex
putting that
Jones.
effort that Mr. Gessler made in context, that they're very tight relationships. So that's what I was attempting to do. But that was my last question.
You're
I'm happy to move
testifying
on.
now.
So objection sustained.
And then lastly, you spent a fair bit of time with Mr. Gessler talking about the fine people on both sides comment that Mr. Trump made.
Yes, that's right.
And he showed you the video of the earlier speech from the White House
That's right.
and seemed to make it seem somewhat incredible that people would focus on just one snippet from those series of speeches that Trump made about fine people on both sides.
Yes.
Well, how do you know that the far-right extremists responded so strongly to Donald Trump's statement of fine people on both sides?
That's the research. That's the data collection, the interviews, the archival materials provides us.
But I didn't
That
talk
is
to anyone
an
from January
absolute
6th.
lie. That is an absolute lie, what he just said there.
Talking about how they interpret
There's good
that.
fine people on both sides. That is a lie.
Can you give us, I know you talk about it in your report, but can you give us a couple examples just offhand of the kind of material you're relying on?
Yeah, I think I might have mentioned this earlier, but David Duke, David Duke, who was present at Unite Riot rally, was one of the featured speakers that they ended up speaking. But Richard Spencer was one of the key organizers in Unite the Riot, and again, Andrew England. All three of them were very public in their thinking of Donald Trump for those comments. And certainly those are just three examples, but there were certainly many other, not so high profile folks that were also expressing similar sentiments in terms of interpreting that message in that fashion.
Thank you, Dr. Simi. That's all the questions I have, but just one housekeeping matter, Your Honor. I'd like to admit those videos of President Trump speaking that I pulled up online.
Edited videos.
Because we talked about them. They're not on the exhibit list. They were responsive to Cross. Oh, they are on the exhibit list. Well, so it's, so then I have exhibit numbers. It's exhibit P51 is the knock the crap out video. Exhibit P52 is,
Yesterday, she didn't seem to allow a follow-up.
my colleague used a different catchphrase than I did, so we'll
I don't
figure
think
it out. Come back to that
vitally
one.
necessary.
P57 is the
I don't
body
think he
slam
did that great
video.
job of fixing this. But
And I will quickly figure out which of the other two are here, and we can admit it at a break.
Okay.
But right now, P51 and P57, we move for
I'd
admission.
like to see a follow-up cross, but I don't think it's like urgent.
52, 57.
Yes. So thank you. Yes. And then Well, yes.
Yes, she didn't seem to allow it. She just moved on to the next witness after redirect.
So we are done with,
Yes.
I have a little bit of recross.
Oh, look at that.
it will be very short because we're not, generally don't allow recross of all.
See?
Thank you for your indulgence.
Sorry, Professor Simi.
No problem.
Look at it this way, Professor Simi, you're getting more experience on the stand and just for your own development there, huh? Okay, just a couple questions. So the sources, I want to talk about the sources that you went to. How did you choose, I mean, what was your process for choosing those sources?
When you said, can you ask the question again?
What was your process for choosing these sources upon which to base your opinion?
The incidents themselves?
Yeah. What was your process? Why did you choose those incidences?
Well, that's part of the research process from studying what happens in terms of during the campaign and what happened after Donald Trump was elected. And so there's certain things that would be relevant to focus on and study in more closer detail. And as you're looking at far-right extremists.
So I'm going to cut you off a little bit only because the court has admonished me to be brief.
Sure.
And I don't want to be too long. So did you listen to every single speech President Trump gave since 2015?
No, I didn't.
You didn't listen to every single word? No.
No, I didn't.
So there may have been lots of parts of those, lots of things he said outside of your scope of review that perhaps endorsed violence. There could have been, right?
You say there were additional examples?
No, I'm asking, you don't know whether there were.
That's fair.
And you don't know whether there was stuff outside of these examples that you didn't look at that where he was advocating peacefulness. You just don't know.
That's fair. In fact, I can guarantee you when you have a pattern, there will be exceptions to the pattern.
Right.
No pattern is ever 100%.
So you're familiar with the term selection bias, right?
Ah.
Okay. So the only way to truly get a representative of President Trump's speech would be to listen to all of it and take a representative sample out, correct?
You wouldn't need to listen to the entire total of the speeches to arrive at an analysis of different segments of the speeches. You wouldn't be sampling at that point. You'd be looking at the entire universe.
Okay.
You weren't sampling either.
So you'd have to take a sample, a random sample of lineup of his speeches. You'd have to line them all up. You'd have to provide identifiers for each minute or each segment, and then you sample each segment, correct?
That would be one way of doing it, although not the only way. Random samples are not the only type of sampling strategy. And again, if we're talking about identifying patterns, you would not need to do what you just described to identify a pattern.
What I'm getting at is it's true, isn't it, that you basically focused on the stuff that you thought was relevant to far right-wing extremism, and you ignored things that you didn't think was relevant to far right-wing extremism.
I don't think that's fair. I think I certainly looked at positive cases, which these would be examples of what we call a positive case. Certainly looked at negative cases. And again, you can identify a pattern by looking at positive cases without looking at every single case in the sample or universe.
So let's look at these positive cases. So the first one is the 2015 Roughed Up, right?
That's correct.
And we saw sample video from that, correct?
That's correct.
And that sample video did not, after Trump or before Trump spoke, President Trump spoke in that video, there was no evidence of someone being roughed up, correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
There was no evidence in that video of someone actually being roughed up.
That's fair.
And in the knock the crap video, there was no evidence of anyone actually having the crap knocked out of them, right?
These are positive cases of encouraging or promoting violence.
I understand. And my point that I'm making, and I'm going through it bit by bit, is that
Always
every one of
encouragement
these
never
was
resulted in
speech,
violence.
and there was no video in any of
Well,
these
let's see violence
examples
this
of
time.
actual violence occurring. Is that correct?
Good.
These are positive cases of promoting violence, so of course not.
So there's no violence that occurred in that video body slam after President Trump spoke? In the video?
Yes, that's right, because these are about promoting violence, not committing violence.
So it's all based on President Trump's speech, correct?
I don't know what the hell
These
this
are all,
witness is trying to.
clips that involve speech, yes.
You're not saying that President Trump actually waded into the audience in 2018 and body slammed someone.
As it pertains to this list, it's a list of positive cases related to promoting violence. That's the specific.
And the promotion of violence is his speech, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And they never result
That's
in
all I had,
actual
Your Honor.
violence. That's what I wanted to say. They never result in actual violence. So why would it result in violence this time?
Mr. Gessler made a gross mischaracterization of the record. I'd like a chance to just show one thing to the witness. If I may, Your Honor.
See, he's really good. I wish he would just tie a bow, a little bow. I really like this attorney, Gessler. I really do. He's really good. Just a little bow. Why would he think this time it would? Didn't work all those other times. No violence. All that rhetoric and riling people up never resulted in violence. So why would he think that this time it would incite violence? So you have no evidence that this time is the first time in his life that it actually successfully incited violence, do you? End of questions. That's it.
Professor
Sit down.
Simi, we saw this. I don't want to replay it. But on the left, we see Trump telling someone to get roughed up, right?
That's correct.
And on the right, he's talking about the fact that the person was roughed up, right?
That's correct.
Right. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that what they were talking about on the right was a person at a Trump rally getting roughed up, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
This is sick. You're watching the downfall of our republic right here in real time. This is what the Democrats.
Only on good logic.
Yeah, only on good logic. Tune in here and make sure you love
Tune in to watch the downfall of our republic right here.
Professor Banks, Your Honor.
Okay, so this is gonna be a short one.
Relatively short.
Okay, so it sounds like we can for sure, get through him.
Depending on the cross-exam, yes.
Okay. Were you planning on then, having another witness start? Or do you think we're in a position that we don't need to use up all the time?
I don't think we need to use up all the time, Your Honor. We could have a witness start, but I think it would make more sense to have the witness start fresh tomorrow.
Are they here? Are they here?
They are here, Your Honor.
Okay,
It's Professor Magliaco who would be the next witness.
okay. Do we need a bathroom break? Okay, I'm getting nods, so let's, start, is it Mr. Banks?
Professor Banks.
Professor Banks, let's start with Professor Banks probably at 2:40, and we'll see how quickly it goes before.
No, hopefully the video doesn't shut down.
The second.
So that's what they did during the break last time on C-SPAN.
But we will stop before regardless.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about strategy of Trump's counsel and whomever. I don't know if Viva's coming back or not, but I like having his fiery hair below us anyway.
This fiery hair. Well, he's better looking than both of us combined. So, we got to get the charisma rub off on us somehow.
Well, no, I don't know. I agree with that, but I think I think you're far better looking. So, yeah, while you're here, if you could hit like and subscribe, I'd appreciate that. So, what I wanted to ask you about is this. So, when the defense was cross-examining Dr. I don't even call him. You call him cross-examining Peter Simi. So every time he's asking questions about, particularly when he's talking about the left, and it looks like this video is dying here. When he's talking about the people on the left when they were calling fight, 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 he phrased it specifically, and it seemed purposefully, as if did this trigger far-right extremists into violence, or was this designed to trigger them? Which obviously they're not even talking to far-right extremists. Far-right extremists are likely not watching these videos or having any knowledge that they exist. So my question is, what do you think about him seeming to purposefully avoid talking about far left extremists and whether or not he thinks that. What do you think about why it is that he strategized that way and whether you think that was a good strategy?
Well, I hate to dignify these trials with some sort of legal analysis, because what we're witnessing here is not legal. This is basically a bunch of left-wing Democrats getting in a room together, talking about how much they hate Trump and the conservatives and the right and their opposition party to them. And so we're witnessing a little conversation where they're all sitting in a round room agreeing with each other about how bad everybody else is and how wonderful they are. And they're seeing the splinter in the eye of their opponent. Now, but the question on the table that you asked me was, why did the defense attorney not bring out questions about left-wing violence? Well, that is, I would suspect, because it's not relevant to the question of whether or not Trump is an insurrectionist. And it goes back to, so what if somebody else committed murder? The question is, did this defendant commit murder? Right.
Right. No,
so it would be subject to an objection as far as relevance goes. Is it relevant that the other side is committing much worse atrocities against our republic? No, because the question is whether or not Trump is qualified to be on the ballot for Colorado. So it surrounds that. So I understand the need, the appeal, the political appeal, but see, that's the whole thing. This is a political trial.
Well,
so,
I'll if I can just respond to why I think it is relevant, is that it's exhibiting that what Trump was engaging in was political speech. And much as these politicians were engaging in political speech that's designed to fire up their base, so too, and without having to concern themselves that the far left extremists are going to actually engage in physical violence, so too Trump was talking to his base without regard for whether that, without having concerns about that riling up far right extremists. So in other words, the point is to establish that this is to just basically point out that this is how politicians on both sides of the aisle engage their audience without having to be concerned that they're going to be brought up on charges that they're inciting violence from their respective followers.
But that's what he did with the montage clip of all the Democrats using similar language. So he did do that.
Yeah, but that's why I'm saying tie a bow on it. Tie a bow on it to establish that this is like basically nail home that, hey, they did not have to have, there's no concern. First, you have to establish that there is such a thing as far left extremists. He would sound a complete whack job if he said that there was no such thing. And in that case, you can give countless examples of far left extremists through the last several decades and all the way up into the summer of love in 2020, engaging in crazy violence. You can show the Chaz and all the other stuff that was happening, the in Seattle and overtaking the police station, all the violence that these leftists engaged in, and if he tries denying that there is such a thing, and then ask whether these politicians, whether he would say that was like, these politicians are all trying to stir up those folks, or do we, and that in that sense just basically point out that this is classic political speech, and no politician should be held accountable that everything they ever say has to be regarded as to like, well, maybe some extremist on my side of the aisle is going to take this as a call for violence.
Well, I have another more fundamental question, and this is a kangaroo trial that's going on. It's a bunch of people sitting around agreeing with each other about how much they hate their opponents. Okay. Mm-hmm. But more fundamentally than this, let's ask a more existential question directed to our country. And that is, does a far right extremist have the right to engage in our political process? And if not, and you are labeling half the country as right-wing extremists, what is, the whole purpose of a system, a Republican system of government, all small r, the whole purpose of our legal system is and free speech for that matter, is to accommodate diverse and debating political views to come out with some direction, to choose a direction for the country. That means we accommodate various voices, including those who are we consider fringe on the outside of what maybe is the mainstream. That doesn't mean they should be excluded. They should be included in the debate, because the opposition, the alternative, is the barrel of a gun, which is not what we want. But what this group is seeking to do, who is pursuing this case, is to create civil war conditions by making half the country without a voice, stripping people who oppose them as a enemy of the state.
And that's part of what this super chat here is. Democrats created slurs. Now they're formally labeling in court right-wing extremists. They were just going to say that these are the ultimate. This is, as Biden said in the Red speech, the ultra MAGA bad guy who's the boogeyman that has to be slain in order to protect democracy.
Right, KFG's got it exactly right. And you remember when the ACLU defended the Nazis' right to march through the largest concentration of Holocaust survivors in this country, I think it was in Illinois, and the ACLU, which was right, and it was a left-wing group that was on the ACLU that defended those people's right to march, because we would rather have their voices out there. Let's speak the truth rather than covering up in a tyranny. In a tyranny, people speak untruths. They speak lies to basically to get along with the dictator and the tyranny that they're in. That is what happens in tyranny, and that is the state of nature that they are seeking to impose on this country.
Yeah, I'm sitting here trying to find part 4, because it's part 3. When I bring up over here this thing,
one of the things that people don't.
This is an ended video. This is not live anymore.
There's a real left-right dichotomy here. The left likes to destroy, basically maximum freedom, which means destroy any rules. They want to tear down rules. The conservatives, the right, generally are rule followers. The consequence of destroying the rules, though, is those people who are rule followers will be without constraint. This is the danger that is being foisted on the right by this aggressive legal attacks on all fronts against all people on the conservative right. If they are successful in destroying the rule of law, there will be no constraints upon either side in that case. And that is not a state. We should pray for the existence of free speech and the rule of law and a vibrant republic. And this is exactly attacked at the heart of our constitutional republic. What's going on here is dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. If this is successful, this will be a model that they can replicate throughout the country. They will disallow huge, the voice of, let's just say it's not a minority. Let's say it's 45% of the population. Do you really want to put a muzzle, destroy the ability of that group to speak? Maybe it's 55%. I don't know. The Nazis only ever won 33% of the vote in Germany. They never achieved a majority and attained power. And we have here this is a very dangerous thing. It's hard for me to even watch this stuff because it's not legal. It's basically a bunch of leftists with a leftist judge and a leftist witness and a leftist prosecutor and a leftist, everybody's on the left, and they're all sitting around agreeing with you. They're agreeing how bad everybody who's conservative is on the right.
Yeah.
And it's like, what we're getting an insight. This is what they want to do. Shut us up, shut us down, keep us off the internet, keep us from speaking, bankrupt us, get us kicked out of our jobs. This is what the plan, right? This is what everybody who's a far right extremist shouldn't be entitled to any of those things. What they can take away our children. How far are we going to go with this?
I'm going to tell you right now. If they decide against Trump, and this survives, and that decision survives appeal, I really worry. I really worry about the impact this will have on that what we saw at the Capitol on January 6th will be a joke compared to the reaction of tens of millions of people. I really worry. I think you would see tons of rallies, and things will just get this country and they're fighting. And think about this. I mean,
No, we're in big trouble. We're in big trouble. This country, you are watching a slow motion destruction of this country in real
self-destruction
time on all these fronts.
Over, and let's think about like how terrible Trump is. I mean, there are so many worse figures who are potentially actually, a danger. And this is where the left has drawn their line. That this is the guy. This guy is too objectionable.
It's not. See, the
that
thing
we have to
is,
draw the line here.
It's not Trump. It's us. It's not Trump, because it's whoever stands in the way of their grasp at power. It's a power play. And it's a power play, just like the new speaker. Nobody even knows who he is, and all of a sudden he's the MAGA speaker, right? He's being demonized. If you remember, DeSantis was being demonized until they found out he didn't have a chance. Now he's the hero, right? It's whoever now. George Bush, remember how demonized he was? Now he's being celebrated. Like, throw out the ball. What a great guy Bush was. Reagan, when he was president,
as soon as they're harmless, as soon as they're harmless, they're totally okay.
Right, but anybody who's could actually oppose the power of the central government and the elites, boy, that's somebody we got to destroy. And that includes the supporters, the people that are on the little guys who go up there and want to wave a little flag in the rotunda. Boy, that's criminal number one. Or somebody who actually might want to question whether the elections are being done fairly, or maybe somebody who wants to actually run against the establishment and do something like defund the FBI and the Department of Justice and the Department of Education and all the Washington insiders.
I'm trying to find a new link from C-SPAN, because the link that we were watching for the last couple of hours has ended. So they're gonna have to start a brand new link. So I'm aware that we're past the 2:40 p.m. restart time that the judge had put down there, and C-SPAN is being really annoying, and just this is I'll share with you. I mean, that's while you're talking. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. While Steve has been talking here, I've been working to try and find whatever new link C-SPAN is going to create. This is not it. This is from this morning. So,
and what they want to do is they started with Alex Jones because they knew that the mainstream conservatives would not defend him because he's got some loony conspiratorial ideas, and they took him down. Remember, it was a big swath. Everybody took him down at once, right? And now he's being destroyed through a civil lawsuit that he cannot discharge in bankruptcy. So now we've got somebody who's a media figure, who's a little wacky, right? But we've got him as an example. Now that's the model that we can drive and attack every conservative who happens to speak out on the thing. So anybody, now we can just give them the old Alex Jones model. Same thing and now if we can get Trump off the ballot here, boy, everybody's an insurrectionist, right?
Yeah. Go to the Hill. People tell me go to the Hill.
Well, you should do some super chats because I think they're piling up and they're going to.
I'll get to them. I really just want to make sure I'm not missing any of the trial. I think that's what people really want. Oh gosh, try it on YouTube.
Yeah, and I mean, Alex Jones, sometimes I watch, he's very entertaining, I got to say. But sometimes he's right on the money, over the target. And sometimes he's talking about Yetis and UFOs, and he's completely lost me. So, but that's why we have free debate. That's why you have First Amendment, because, people can talk and they can be wrong. It's amazing. Most of the time we're wrong. That's the whole idea of freedom. Freedom. This is an embarrassment. Rachel nailed it. I can't believe it's real either. This is my country. We've lost the country. I mean, I hate to be cynical about it, but now the question is, what kind of country are we living in? We're obviously living in some sort of strange post-republic weaponization from the elites in Washington, D.C. and these major federal agencies that are taking our monies. And what's going to, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot. It's a banana. It's worse than a banana republic because it, you know, like, what is it? Abe Lincoln even said, I prefer my tyranny pure. Right?
Have come to Syracuse or me to
What the heck?
Washington to work through some scenarios, red teaming and the like.
Do you
This is very
defend the
weird.
far left? Do we defend the far right? Yes. They're all part of the system. Everybody has a voice. The last I heard, the Constitution does not discriminate.
This is our next witness.
Oh, this guy?
Yeah.
President Trump had at his disposal to quell the violence on January 6th.
And are you prepared to testify about that here today?
I am.
Have you ever served in the military?
I have not.
But have you worked with the military?
In those contract cases that I mentioned a moment ago, I've had several consulting relationships with entities inside the Department of Defense over the years, yes.
And have you ever
Maybe
advised
true.
the military?
With respect to emergency preparedness and response and follow-ups to those case studies.
It likely will come down to an appeal.
Well, if you never served in the military, how did you get interested in national security?
Joseph.
Short story.
Oh, hell, gods.
1987, Presidents Reagan and Gorbachev were at one of their well-known summits and efforts to try to develop a framework for the reduction.
Who are these people to remove from us our choice of who we elect?
It's disgusting. It's disgusting. That's what it is.
It's disgusting. This little pea-brained attorney and these snobby experts who think that they know what I think and what you think and what everybody else thinks. These people are going to remove from me the ability to vote for who I want to vote for.
Oh, I was in my office and my phone rang and it was a reporter, a national reporter from somewhere, and she asked, "Could the president?"
I think Jackals, as usual, has really nailed
whimsically launch
how the unraveling began. All right, Steve, you got to get out of here. I appreciate you coming by.
Always fun, man. We'll do it again soon. We'll talk
You're
after
really,
this.
your insight is always appreciated. Thank you, my brother.
I try to avoid these kind of streams because they make me so upset. I mean, they're so disgusting. I salute you and God bless you. You're a good man. And thank you very much for all you do.
Follow
Gotta
this
go.
man down here. Follow him. Steve Gosney, you're awesome, brother. Take care.
Used in more than 100 American law schools.
What does your academic scholarship focus on?
Focuses on those same areas. I have nearly 200 books and articles on subjects of constitutional law, national security law, presidential power, counterterrorism law. In recent years, a fair number of pieces in cybersecurity.
Have you written any books or articles on the topic you're here to testify on today, namely the president's authority to respond to domestic security threats?
The most prominent book is called Soldiers on the Home Front, the domestic role of the American military. It was published by Harvard University Press in 2016.
Roughly how many articles and books do you think you've written related to the topic of the president's authority to deal with domestic security threats?
Somewhere between 30 and 40.
Have you given any presentations or lectures on that topic?
Many of them around the United States and around the world, yes.
Give me an estimate of how many you think.
30.
I'm not sure what this
Are you a
witness's
member of
name
any
is because we didn't get the link in time
professional
from C-SPAN.
related to the topic you are here to testify on today?
But he's definitely an expert witness.
American Bar Association Standing Committee on Law and National Security. I just completed my second term as chair. That committee was created by Justice Lewis Powell in 1962. It's the oldest standing committee of the ABA. I'm also the past president of the Association of American Law Schools section on national security law.
I hope you're wrong,
Where
Jackals.
did you go to law school?
About 4 blocks from here at the University of Denver.
When did you graduate from DU?
1974, when the law school was still downtown.
I was going to say, did you get any other degrees?
Yes, I stayed on at DU and took a course of study called Master of Science in Law and Society. It was a post-law master's. It no longer is available here, I believe, but I achieved that degree in 1982.
Now, when again did you
bugs.
start teaching at Syracuse?
In 1978.
Be happy and eat some bugs.
Studying and teaching at the same time for a bit.
And when did you start teaching national security law and related topics?
After the Reagan-Gorbachev meetings restarted, I think my first class was in 1989, and the book was first published in 1990.
So before moving to your opinions, I wanted to ask you about any research you did specific to this case. What, if anything, did you review regarding the January 6th, 2021 attack and events leading up to it in coming to your opinions in this case?
I reviewed several documents, including the January 6th committee report.
Oh, the committee report. That's very reliable. That's completely impartial.
The January 6th period, the Inspector General report of the Department of Defense completed in the following year.
Give us a list of all the political enemies of Trump who you relied on for your source.
Sections of the United States Constitution, several scholarly articles.
Your Honor, at this point, we would like to tender Professor Banks as an expert in the U.S. President's powers to prevent or stop domestic attacks on the government and the authorities that President Trump had to call on to stop the attack on January 6th.
Your Honor, we'll renew our 702 objections that this is, he's testifying on an issue of law that the court is better equipped to handle, and that it's not appropriate to have legal opinions coming as after reports, as actual testimonies.
I will, to the extent you're renewing your motion, should I have the motion for the same reasons I did in my written ruling? And I will.
Insane for her to take somebody testifying about the law.
As an expert on national security and I think it was the presidential powers to respond to a domestic attack.
Yes, Your Honor. So the President's authorities to respond to a domestic attack.
Correct.
Now,
Can I ask you a question though before we go on? Where was the DU Law School?
Across the street from the Art Museum.
No idea. I learn something new every day.
It was a pretty small structure. In fact, all the clinical programs had to be downtown office buildings. Did many of those. So I spent about half my time in the school and half in the clinics, which then adjoined the old YMCA, I think.
Little trivia.
It is.
so I wanted to start with one of the findings from the January 6th committee that I think you referenced in your report. And this is from page 577 of the January 6th report. And you've got a
January 6th report is
Trump
hearsay.
could have called top officials at the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, the FBI, the Capitol Police Department, or the DC Mayor's office to ensure that they quelled the violence. Was that one of the findings in the January 6th report that you reviewed?
It was.
What is your view of that finding?
I think the finding is correct.
Why?
Well, the president had plentiful authority to respond to the January 6th attack, including by reference to all the departments that are included in that sentence that you just reviewed. In addition to that, as many here know, he's also the commander of the DC National Guard, and they have very potentially important.
National Guard.
Let me stop you there. And I want to start asking you some questions specific to the DC National Guard. What authority does the U.S. president have over the DC National Guard?
The President of the United States is in a unique position vis-a-vis the DC National Guard. He's the commander. He's the commander, notwithstanding any interest of the mayor or anyone else in the district.
The commander of the National Guard
He's
went
been
on
the
Tucker
commander
and
of the
said
DC
we were
National Guard
not
since
authorized to go in there.
1889. At the time,
We were waiting for the
Congress,
call.
Conferred that position by
Or was it?
statute.
No,
on
the head of DC Police
There was no local government.
said the National Guard was told that they
No, in every other
didn't get approval
state,
from Nancy.
The governor is the commander of the militia when they're going down.
I disagree with this.
Because there's no governor.
I mean, they may decide against it. That may
Congress
happen.
does not seem fit, at least up to
I
this
don't
time,
think that the right is going to
confer that
just take that
status of
quickly.
command on the mayor. The president's been consistently in charge of the DC National Guard since 1889.
Roughly how many members of the DC
Cash.
National Guard were there on January 6th?
I'm told there were around 2,000, 1,100 or so who were activated by that date.
And you talked about this a little bit, but how does the president's authority over the DC National Guard differ from his authority over National Guards in other states?
It's uniquely different. There's a principle in American law called posse comitatus, the Latin stands for power of the county, which is neither here nor there, but the posse comitatus law was enacted after the Civil War to establish a baseline presumption that we don't want members of the military enforcing.
Where'd they get 500 U.S. hostages from?
We've always entrusted civilian law enforcement
What?
to civilians.
I don't know what that means.
As a culture and as a society, have wanted to keep it that way. The exception to that principle are the National Guards of the various states and the District of Columbia. When those forces are called out by the governor, or in the case of D.C., by the President of the United States, they are in what's called the militia capacity, active duty state capacity, and posse comitatus does not apply. So they may supplement law enforcement by their own force, and that force was available to the president on January 6th.
Well, let me ask you this, just backing up. You had said that posse comitatus does not apply to the DC National Guard.
That's correct.
So can the DC National Guard then be deployed to engage in what would traditionally be law enforcement activities?
They may.
And who has the authority to do that?
President of the United States.
Does the president, in order to deploy the DC National Guard, need the permission or a request from the mayor of DC?
He does not.
Does he need permission or a request from anyone?
No, he does not.
If President Trump in the days leading up to January 6th had been concerned about the potential for violence, what could he have done regarding the DC National Guard?
Even if this guy is accurate, if all the people acting believe otherwise, then Trump is still powerless. That's what's so stupid about this testimony.
Do you need the question again? Or if President Trump in the days leading up to January 6th had been concerned about the potential for violence, what, if anything, could he have done with the DC National Guard?
He could have deployed them.
This is such a waste of time. This win is such a waste of time.
Again, what sort of permission or request would he have needed from the mayor?
You don't know what he was told. You don't know what these people told him.
Once President Trump
you know
knew that
anything
a
about what he
mob,
was told about
a
his
violent mob was
ability to
attacking
get
the Capitol on January 6th,
National Guard, DC National
what,
Guard.
if anything, could he have done with the DC National Guard?
He could have immediately ordered them to.
Theoretically,
would he have needed any request or permission from the mayor?
No.
Now,
yeah, and
put
Pence
aside
also
January
could
6th,
have sent the
and let's
ballots
go
back to
in
the
time a
states.
little bit. Have you seen any evidence?
You're sitting here as
of
the
President Trump
expert on this,
deploying the DC National Guard,
and none of the other people
in
involved
Washington,
also,
DC
much as
prior
Pence
to
didn't
the
think he had the
November,
power.
2020
supposedly.
election?
In the summer of 2020, I believe it was early June, the president deployed the National Guard and various law enforcement personnel in the wake of the protests surrounding the murder of George Floyd.
Did the president need any permission to do that?
He did not.
Do you recall if there was a request from the mayor's office for him to do that?
There was not.
Now, there's been some suggestion already in this case that prior to January 6th, President Trump authorized 10 to 20,000 National Guard troops to be available at the Capitol. Is that even possible?
It would have been very difficult to envision.
I have no. Do you know if that happened? No. Do you know it didn't happen?
Order by the president was ever issued. One reason I say it would have been difficult is that the National Guard, when federalized by the President of the United States, he certainly has the legal authority to do that, to call National Guard from anywhere and federalize them. They then are subject to the posse comitatus principle and could not have engaged in direct law enforcement in D.C. If he's going to rely on National Guard from the governors of adjoining states, for example, he may well do that, and they then are not subject to posse comitatus, but then they're subject to the command of their governor, not the command of the President of the United States.
So I want to break that down. So there's the 10 to 20,000 number. How many roughly DC National Guard over which the president had authority were there?
There were up to 1,100. About 340 have been pre-positioned on that day for duties unrelated to law enforcement.
If the president had, in fact, authorized far more than that, he would have had to go through governors.
Yes.
If the president had, in fact, authorized 10 to 20,000 National Guard troops to be available on January 6th, what type of documentation would you expect to have seen?
Why would that? Why is this even relevant?
Excuse me, Your Honor. This is way beyond his expert report. And if I remember correctly, you had said that because we weren't doing depositions, that the experts would be limited to their expert reports.
That is absolutely true. I'm gonna.
I was just going to bring up where it is. We served a supplemental expert report.
That brought
Your
out my
Honor.
Jim Carrey mask laugh.
And this is on page 3 of that supplemental expert report. And this is addressed right there.
Can you give me a few minutes to figure out?
Guys, to find it?
Yep. Well, in my documents.
It's clearly there, so I'm gonna,
What page are we looking at?
It's page 3 of the supplemental report.
first sentence of the first full paragraph.
Yeah, and it's actually a full paragraph on this topic that carries over to page 4.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Objection overruled.
What documentation would you have expected to see if there had in fact been an authorization of 10 to 20,000 National Guard troops to be available on January 6th?
We would have seen documentation inside the Department of Defense, and we would have also seen documentation from the National Guard Bureau for any forces that came from adjoining states.
Why would you expect to see documentation when 10 to 20,000 troops have been authorized?
Because that's a significant number. They're not DC National Guard. They're either going to be federalized, again, in which case classic comitatus would prevent them from law enforcement, or they're coming from adjoining states, probably Maryland and Virginia, and the governors of those states and the command in those states would have to issue orders to their force.
Did you review documents in this case to see whether there were in fact records of an authorization of 10 to 20,000 troops?
I did review the Inspector General's report of the Department of Defense that was compiled during the year after the January 6th events. And I also reviewed the January 6th committee report extensively, and in neither case did I see any indication of an order for that size of magnitude of force from anywhere.
I want to show you what's been submitted as Exhibit TV. It's one of President Trump's exhibits, and we would move to admit it. I assume there'll be no objection. TV, it was the 3-page Department of Defense timeline. Oh, they're renumbered? Okay. Well, I'm going to call it TV for the moment. I'll let you know, Your Honor, and we have no objection to it being admitted. So I'm going to show this to you, Professor. Do you recognize what's marked here as Exhibit TV?
I do. It's the Department of Defense timeline on the days surrounding January 6th.
Is there anything, who put together that timeline?
The Pentagon.
Is there anything in that timeline reflecting a presidential authorization of 10 to 20,000 National Guard troops?
There is not.
What does that suggest to you?
That it never happened.
What other
So
documents?
if there were
did
1,100
you
guards,
review to
why
determine
didn't they
if
call them
there
them?
was an
Like, I don't
authorization
understand
of
why that
10 to
number is
20,000
relevant at all.
Again, I read carefully through the DOD Inspector General report.
So if he said there were 20,000 people available, and there are only 1,100 of them,
What about the January 6th
therefore
report?
what?
Likewise, extensively reviewed.
Why didn't they call them the 1,100?
Such an authorization.
Like this
Now,
is
I
so
wanna
this
go
is
to
this is
an
such a
entry on
stupid
January 3rd, 2021.
issue to be trying
Do you
to
see
pound
that?
home.
Yes.
And there's a bullet point, the third bullet point, and what I've learned from doing this is the military really likes acronyms. So I'm going to spell them out and correct me if I'm wrong. The third bullet point says, Acting Secretary of Defense and Chairman of
I put
the
a
Joint
poll up
Chiefs
to
of
amuse you
Staff
while
meet with
this-
the President.
this
President concurs in
ridiculous line of
activation
questioning
the
is
DC
going on.
National Guard to support law enforcement. Could that be an authorization of 10 to 20,000 troops?
It could not. You see a couple of things about that bullet point. One is the reference there is to the DC National Guard, not to any forces, and there weren't 10 or 20,000 DC National Guard personnel available for deployment on that day. And second, if we look back up the timeline, you see that the Sunday, January 3 bullets are partially in response to a request by Mayor Bowser and Homeland Security Chief Rodriguez from December 31, requesting a modest number of National Guard personnel to perform traffic duties, metro enforcement, and a few other things on that day, totaling about 340 personnel.
So I want to ask you about that in just a second. Your Honor, housekeeping matter, it's Exhibit 1027.
And no objection, Mr. Blow?
No, Your Honor.
1027 is submitted.
Now, you said earlier there's no reflection of an authorization of 10 to 20,000 troops in this timeline put together by the Department of Defense. But is there a discussion of some much smaller number of troops that were
Yes,
authorized?
that's the 340 now that you're going to highlight on the Monday, the 4th of January. This was Mayor Bowser's request. And you see there traffic control, 2 shifts of 90, metro station support, 2 shifts of 24, so-called WMD civil support team, which was about 20, and then command and control personnel 52. And on top of that, it was authorized a quick reaction force of 40, which would be staged at Joint Base Andrews, but available for deployment if needed.
So the 340, were those
Wow.
deployed in the
They
Capitol?
really have nothing. If
in
this is where they're
Washington, D.C., not at
fixating,
the
they have
Capitol
nothing.
on January 6th.
Not the 40, the remaining.
They have 2 cops from
340.
January 6th.
Of the remaining.
Swalwell saying he was, I was scared.
They were deployed.
And
And again, they were in 2 shifts, so they weren't all there. at
and
one
an
time.
expert who says, I really hate Trump. And so anything he says is
We're at
mean
Metro Station,
and
command
looking for
control
insurrection.
During the entire day.
And that's my fault. It's 300 around the city and then 40 at Andrews Air Force Base.
That's correct.
So what were the 40 at Andrews Air Force Base doing?
Well, they were awaiting instruction to move to the district because they were simply there to respond to a disturbance if one broke out. A disturbance if one broke out.
What, if anything, could President Trump have done on January 6th with regard to the 300 troops stationed around the city and the 40 troop quick reaction force at Andrews Air Force Base once he knew that the Capitol was under attack?
Once he learned that that force had already been deployed inside the district and he could see from his own video screen that violence was breaking out at the Capitol, he could have redeployed them from their existing stations to the Capitol with the time, a limited amount of time needed to get there, and then also to be equipped with riot gear. Riot gear was apparently stored in convenient places near their present places of deployment.
Thank you.
In your
I'm
review
gonna
of the
modify that.
documents, did you see any evidence that President Trump did that?
No.
We've talked about what he could have done with the DC National Guard. Is there anything that he could have done with regard to the Virginia or Maryland National Guard units once he knew the Capitol was under attack?
He could have spoken with the governors of those respective states for either one of them and approved their deployment of their forces to the Capitol as quickly as possible.
Now, that would have taken longer, right?
That would have taken longer. There's the time to get from Maryland or Virginia to the Capitol. And there's also the communication that would have to go on between the Pentagon and those National Guard officials.
In your review of the evidence in this case, did you see anything to suggest that President Trump employed that authority?
He did not.
Now, we've discussed what President Trump could have done with the National Guard. Was that the only law enforcement entity that he could have called on that day?
No, he could have called on other executive branch agencies to deploy personnel.
Let me show you what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 148 at, page 77. And do you see a tweet there?
Yes,
Who is that tweet from?
from then President Trump.
What date was that tweet sent?
January 5:25 p.m.
The night before the January 6th attack?
Yes.
And what does Mr. Trump say?
He's warning Antifa to stay out of Washington. He said law enforcement is watching, and then he tags.
Because he didn't want more violence, and he knew there was going to be a lot of people who were from MAGA there.
The Justice Department, the Department of Homeland Security, actually the Department of Interior, that's Secretary Bernhardt, and the Secret Service, plus the FBI's Department of Justice.
How, if at all, do those tagged entities relate to the law enforcement authorities that President Trump could have mobilized on January 6th when he saw that the Capitol was under attack?
Particularly the first three, the second, the Justice Department and DHS have personnel that could have been brought to the Capitol from headquarters very quickly on that day. rapid response teams that could have deployed to the Capitol on the order of the president.
What could he have done with the Department of Homeland Security?
They likewise have a rapid response team that could have deployed in a matter of minutes from headquarters to the Capitol.
You said Secretary Bernhardt is the Secretary or was the Secretary of the Interior. What relevance does the Secretary of the Interior have to law enforcement personnel that could have been mobilized on January 6th?
That department includes the National Park Service.
The National Park Service is who you should have sent into the Capitol. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
On the territory for which the National Park Service is responsible.
And what about the Secret Service?
They have, of course, a protective detail, a large segment of protective personnel who could have been instructed either by the Secretary of DHS or by the President himself to respond to the crisis.
How about the FBI?
Likewise, Department of Justice, they would have been among the first personnel that the Attorney General would have contacted if there was a call from the President.
What authority does the President of the United States have over all of those entities?
The simplest and most direct authority is his responsibility as Chief Executive under Article 2 of the Constitution to take care that all the laws be faithfully executed.
Yeah,
That includes faithfully executing the transition and accounting.
that's a fifth grade civics answer, but that's not
And
really
do all
relevant
those
with respect to
entities report up ultimately to the President? What, if any, evidence have you seen that President Trump took any action to deploy any of these entities on January 6th?
Seeing no such evidence.
Who else in the world had all of those authorities at their disposal on January 6th?
No one else.
No further questions.
I don't think this cross will be very long. It really wasn't that damaging. It's insane. And yeah, it was a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking. It really was. It's like, yeah, no, come on. Why didn't he do this?
Professor Banks, how are you today? We met briefly earlier. We did. So I want to talk a little bit about your qualifications. You've been a professor in national security for a while, you said, and you've had some contract experience with the military. Have you, what's your experience in advising governors or presidents in national security issues? And have you ever, so you've never actually advised a president on actually declaring an emergency or activating the National Guard, is that correct?
Only in a war game scenario with hypothetical players.
That's nice. It's a wonder that Trump didn't call upon your expertise.
And so your advice, your testimony today is
theoretical,
frankly, not about practicality, but more about what the law says. Isn't that correct?
That's exactly where I was going.
Well, but you've never been in that kind of crisis, so you wouldn't really know how the laws would actually interact.
Or how
in
the
that
actors would
situation with you.
respond. Oh,
But
really?
you've never actually been in one, correct?
Mr. Blue?
I went over them again, right?
Yeah, just both of you try not to talk over each other for the court reporter.
Sorry, Your Honor. And sorry to the court reporter. If we could pull up Exhibit 1045, please.
What exhibit?
1045. Professor Banks, sorry, I was spacing on your name for a second. This is a letter from June 4th from Mayor Bowser to President Trump, correct? Have you seen this letter before? And you've read it, but you did not consider this letter in your expert report because it wasn't listed as one of the things you
relied on.
Looked at, is it? And if you would look at the last sentence of the first paragraph, and could you read, starting with therefore, could you read that, please, out loud?
Therefore, I am requesting that you withdraw all extraordinary federal law enforcement and military presence from Washington, D.C.
Thank you. And now I know earlier you testified that the president has sole authority, whatever. Are you aware about how that authority has been delegated?
Yes.
And could you explain to the court what that is?
In the 1969 executive order, President Nixon actually delegated to the Secretary of Defense.
That's what we're listening to right here.
Army by memorandum, the day-to-day authority over deployment decisions with regard to the National Guard.
Thank you. And you had testified earlier that that this letter came from the summer during the Black Lives Matter protests and riots, correct? And are you aware of whether Mayor Bowser approved of the deployment of National Guard at that time?
I haven't seen nothing to indicate that she did.
Have you seen anything to indicate that she did not approve of it? So this is the only document we have that references that, correct? And isn't it true that once President Trump received this letter, the National Guard was removed from Washington, D.C. at the time?
I believe that's true. I didn't study those incidents carefully.
And if you could read the last sentence of the third paragraph, please.
Deployment of federal law enforcement personnel and equipment are inflaming demonstrators and adding to the grievances of those who by and large are peacefully protesting for change, and the reference to the racist and broken systems that are killing Black Americans.
Whoops.
Reform, I'm sorry. To the racist and broken systems that are killing Black
So bringing them in could have made it worse. According to me, or Bowser, it would have made it worse.
Yeah, I can't, but Joanna can. So the reason I wanted to talk about this letter for a moment is while there's formal authorities, correct, there are also informal relationships and informal authorities involved in the governmental process, correct? And President Trump and Mayor Bowser are the two people who have authority in Washington, D.C., correct?
Only the president has authority.
I didn't ask that question. I appreciate that. But they're the ones with the authority in Washington, D.C., correct? And while President Trump may have actual legal authority, he has to work with Mayor Bowser going forward, correct? And when you were giving your opinion, it doesn't appear that you considered at all the political ramifications or that relationship between President Trump and Mayor Bowser.
I was giving legal opinion, I think.
Legal opinion. That's why he can't be testifying. Move to strike his entire testimony.
All right, if we could go to Exhibit
He's giving a legal
148,
opinion.
please.
Move to strike his entire testimony.
We're going to be going to
You definitely need to renew
Page
your objection
6.
to him testifying at all.
And we're going to talk about the May 30 tweet, please. And you referenced this tweet in your report, didn't you?
Yes.
And why did you reference this tweet?
It's an indication that President Trump was familiar with the uses of the National Guard for national security.
And are you aware of how the National Guard ultimately was deployed into Minneapolis?
I don't know the details of that incident, no.
So you don't know, in fact, you did not address in your report or here that President Trump did not unilaterally order the National Guard into Minneapolis, did he?
He did not. I believe that was the governor's deployment.
Right. Okay. So that was the governor's decision, correct?
But Mr. Hypothetical knows all about Kent State.
In your report, you also mentioned the fact that President Trump should have activated the National Guard on January 5th, right?
Yes.
And
January 5th? No, my determination was that he should have activated the National Guard in response to the violence that broke out on January 6th.
can you, where's my? Do you know this?
Would it have led to a massacre of many more civilians if the National Guard came in there?
Excuse me, I apologize. I did not expect to have to find this in the report. Well, let's do this a different way. So leading up to this January 6th, if we could go to 156, please. And
I don't
Exhibit
think this
156
attorney is as
is a
strong
tweet from
as
Mayor
Gosney.
Bowser that includes a letter that she sent to President Trump, correct? I'm not to President Trump, but to the United States Attorney General, the Acting Secretary of Defense, and the Secretary of the Army, correct? And remind us who actually had command authority of the DC National Guard through the delegation of authority.
President Trump delegated to the acting secretary at the time and the secretary of the Army.
So the Secretary of Defense, who then delegated on down to the Secretary of the Army, right? So this letter was to the two individuals had been delegated the authority by President Nixon, and that delegation was still in effect at the time, correct? Right. And if you read the tweet from Mayor Bowser, she talks about that she's not requesting any other federal law enforcement personnel and discourages any additional deployment without notification or consultation, correct? So she was making it very clear on the day before January 6th that she didn't want National Guard, didn't she?
That's right. She was not anticipating a violent attack on the Capitol,
Well, and that's true. And is it your testimony today that President Trump was anticipating a violent attack on the Capitol? Okay. All right. And if in the letter, and you've read this letter before, correct? And the letter says basically the same thing, doesn't it? And so your testimony is not that he should have actually deployed National Guard, not just the 300 or the 340, but the 1,100 who were available. You're not saying that he should have had them ready to go on January 5th to deploy on January 6th?
No.
Okay. Just a minute.
If he loses, it likely will likely be appealed through the appeal courts in state court in Colorado before.
So, are you aware of any warnings that suggested that maybe there was going to be violence at the Capitol? Is it your testimony today that even if Mayor Bowser said that President Trump should not deploy troops, that he should have done it anyway? So you think that he should ignore the elected official in Washington, D.C. if he disagrees with her on this issue?
He should respond to his constitutional.
That's real Monday morning quarterback, like Kelly pointed out.
Security of the United States when there's assault on our democratic process.
Okay. And are you aware of any other national politician who said that he should not be deploying troops to Washington, D.C.? Like, so if Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said, do not deploy troops, he shouldn't listen, he should just do it, correct?
I'm not familiar with Mr. McConnell.
Do you know if he?
Well, no, I'm saying if he did it. If Senate Majority Leader McConnell said, do not deploy troops into Washington, D.C., President Trump should ignore them, correct?
That's correct.
And if
Well,
Nancy
here's your
Pelosi said
hypothetical
that, you're
guy
also, he
with
should
real
ignore it and go
expertise.
forward.
Once the violence broke out, yes.
That's your call. That's totally your call, Mr. Theoretical here. Are you familiar with the Kent State Massacre? Do you know that it would not have happened?
So on January 6th, you say that he should have deployed the National Guard, correct? At what point?
As soon as he was aware that violence had broken out at the Capitol, sometime after 1 p.m. that day.
So, okay, so there's violence at the Capitol and there's police forces there. But at what point in that process should he be thinking, okay, now I need to get the National Guard in. They're not going to be able to take care of this problem.
My recollection of the specific minutes in those hours, may not be exact, but I believe around
At some
1:34, mayor and the chief of police at the Capitol placed a call to the White House seeking support, seeking more law enforcement support, and they repeated that call. I think it was at 1:49. So there were at least 2 calls before 2 p.m. that day that should have alerted the president of what he was already seeing on his television screen, that there was a violent attack going on in the Capitol.
And are you aware specifically of what President Trump knew and when he knew it?
Are you aware of what he did, or who he spoke to, or what advice he got?
All right, let's move to Exhibit 22.
I don't like this lawyer.
This is examining the U.S. Capitol attack, a review of the security planning and response failures on January 6th.
Muriel Bowser. No.
Okay. And this is the staff report from the Senate that was a bipartisan report. Have you read this report? Okay. But you did not take this report into account when you were giving your opinion today, did you? And so you did not include any of the statements in this report in your expert report or your opinion, correct? And would you agree that there was a lack of consensus about the gravity of the threat that was going to be posed on January 6th? Okay. If we could go to page 46. Yeah, page 46 of the report. And I think I have the right page. Yep. And if you could blow up the first paragraph under section C. And I want to focus on the first sentence. And could you read that first sentence?
Inconsistencies between intelligence products and within the January 3rd special assessment led to a lack of consensus about the gravity of the threat posed on January 6, 2021.
And so what that sentence is saying is that this committee found that there really wasn't, it was really unclear about what was going on January 6th and about the threats on that coming forward from the right wing. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
And if we could go to page 48. I should go there too. And we'll look at the first paragraph. And again, we have Mr. Irving. And Mr. Irving, I'll represent, was the House Sergeant at Arms. All right. And he told the committees every Capitol Police daily intelligence report from January 4th through January 6th, including on January 6th, forecast the chance of civil disobedience and arrest during the protests as remote to improbable. Again, highlighting the fact that this was an unprecedented and unexpected event, correct?
Correct.
And if you go down just to the next paragraph, it says months following the attack on the U.S. Capitol, there is still no consensus among the USCP, which is the United States Capitol Police, right? Officials about the intelligence report's threat analysis ahead of January 6th, correct? So again, we're highlighting the fact that that there just was no the intelligence reports weren't clear and weren't being presented that suggested that this kind of event could happen, correct?
Yes.
All right, and if we could move to Exhibit 1031, please.
I really am getting frustrated with this attorney because he's not
And
pounding
Exhibit
home that he has no
1031
idea
is
what
the
advice Trump got.
Inspector General's report regarding January 6th,
What word
correct?
about that?
And you referenced this
hazard
earlier in your testimony
to bring
today,
the
didn't you?
National Guard.
So you've read this document? And if we could turn to page 18 of the PDF, I have the right page this time. And you look at where it says January 3rd, the fourth block down, the fourth row. And it says the president asked Mr. Miller and General Milley about election protest preparations, correct? And he was informed, we've got a plan and we've got it covered, correct? So the president at that point was informed that
That a plan was in place to take care of things, correct? Is there any reason that you would think that he would not believe that?
No.
Now, you have given us a number of options that the president had legally, correct? And you haven't identified a single instance where the president has actually activated the National Guard in a way that did not coordinate with the local political officials, correct? So you can't identify a time where he's activated the National Guard in Washington, D.C. without Mayor Bowser's approval, without the mayor of Washington, D.C.'s approval, correct?
We're going to rewind that question a bit. I'm a little confused. I think in June of 2020, he called out those units on his own volition without a request from the mayor.
Well, earlier you said that you had no idea if she agreed with it or not, correct?
He did this unilaterally, did it on his own authority in June or late May, whatever it was, in 2020 in response to the Floyd protests.
Okay, well, when we were talking about this earlier, I asked you if you knew if she approved it or if they talked about it or if they had a conversation, and you said you did not know. Is that correct? Yes. So you do not know whether she actually was communicating with him about that?
No.
Correct.
Finally, we got there.
And I can't remember, did you say that the president could have declared a national emergency? Is that something you said?
It's in my report. I don't believe I testified to it this afternoon.
Are you aware of a president declaring a national emergency within 2 or 3 hours of a riot starting?
Oh, yes, many times.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. Like what?
Little Rock, 1950s, Birmingham, early 1960s, Los Angeles, 1984.
Okay. Within 3 hours?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Bad question. Told you, I'm not fond of this attorney.
And are you aware of any debates that were going on inside the White House regarding a response
Finally.
to the riots on January 6th? So you have no idea about whether why the decisions
That's what
were
you should
being
have been
made
asking
not
all
to,
along.
for the president not to actually do the things that you've said? You don't know if he considered doing them, do you?
You know, if he
You're
was
just
all
saying
done
that
with them.
these are things that he possibly could have done. Isn't that correct?
Isn't it a shame that Bill Banks wasn't on his staff, because he would have gotten
All
his
right,
totally
Your Honor,
right.
that's all I have. But I would like to admit the 5 exhibits we talked about today.
He finally got to the right
1031,
question. It took him like way too
1045,
long. And he danced
148,
in stupid areas.
156, and 22.
Okay. Well, do you have any objections to any of them?
No.
Okay. Did you get the number? Can you repeat it one more time?
I tried to go slow. Apparently I have to go even slower. 1031, 1045, 148, 156, 22. What? I'm sorry, it's 1056.
Instead of
You
what?
sure? Because it's 156 on here. Hold on. Let me look at my notes. It's 156, not 1056.
Oh my God.
And it's 148, not 1048.
1031, 1045, 148, 156, 22.
Sounds like tax forms. Briefly, Your Honor.
I think there's
You
one
were
more
asked a
witness.
number of questions about whether in the lead
the
up to January
direct.
6th, there was any consensus about whether there might be violence that day. Do you recall that? As of 1:30 in the afternoon on January 6th, was there consensus about whether there was violence?
Yes,
What was that consensus?
violence was breaking out in the Capitol.
Objection, Your Honor. I'm not sure what the basis of that statement is other than they really saw on TV.
Overruled.
All right, this
You
this
reviewed
lawyer has to go to
January
the
6th
back
report
team.
Coming to the opinions in this case,
I did.
I want to show you a few. The first one is finding 316. Oh, sorry, I'm not hooked up. That's his. That's his. Finding 316 says by 1:21 p.m., President Trump was informed that the Capitol was under attack. You see that?
Yes.
What, if anything, did you see the president or any evidence of the president doing prior to 4/17 with regard to exercising his authorities to deploy either the National Guard or the federal law enforcement personnel we discussed earlier?
Absolutely nothing.
I don't
Do you
think this
recall what the
witness is
January
very
6th
damaging.
report said about what President Trump was doing during that nearly 3-hour period of time?
I believe he said he was watching the television screen and tweeting.
Now, you were asked about whether perhaps Senator McConnell or House Speaker Pelosi had said they don't want the DC National Guard at the Capitol. Did you see anything to suggest they were saying that as of 1:30 p.m. on January 6th?
No, those statements were prior to the outbreak of the violence.
Okay, but you don't know if
Finally,
they
you were
ever
asking
retracted it to
questions
you.
about whether there was even consensus the morning of January 6th as to whether there might be violence. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Have you seen any evidence that the president told any of those individuals?
So because he
that was
didn't see
going to
evidence,
ask them to
objection,
march down
relevance.
to the Capitol? Did you see any evidence that the president told any of those individuals that there were people refusing to go through magnetometers before his speech? Did you see any evidence that President Trump told any of those authorities what he was going to say?
Objection on who he's leading again.
It's not just leading. Leading is the weakest possible objection you have.
What evidence, if any, did you see that President Trump told any of those security officials what he was going to say on the ellipse that day?
I saw no such evidence.
No further questions.
In your opinion, Your Honor, I have no recross.
You know.
And I apologize, I didn't ask the Colorado Republican Party or the Secretary of State about Professor Simi, whether you wanted to do anything, but I'm assuming you would have shouted at me if I had not, but I will give you the opportunity now. Do you have any questions for Professor Banks?
We have no questions. No questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Great. So for all
Rookie judge.
of you with young kids, I'm sure you'll be happy to hear we've got a recess.
All right.
Please, though, I know that people have a lot going on with Halloween.
Well,
Not going trick or treating, but distributing candy. Can you please so make sure to let us know who the live witnesses are going to be tomorrow? We need to know that today. So with that, we will go off the record on case number
I want to find out what time they're going to be reopening tomorrow.
22577, and we will reconvene at 8 a.m. tomorrow.
if you could please like and subscribe, I would really appreciate it. That's the primary motivation I have for streaming trials and sitting here all day with you, is because I know that in YouTube's environment, that is apparently we're not going to hear what time this time tomorrow. That is the primary way this is the primary method that I have for developing subs. So if you've enjoyed this stream today, I would be most obliged. Super chatting is nice and always welcome, obviously, but I really urge anyone who's sitting here and watching to please like and subscribe. It really, and that applies YouTube, that applies Facebook, that applies Rumble. And you can also, I also urge you to check me out on Locals, which is a goodlogic.locals.com. That's goodlogic.locals.com. Name of the channel, .locals.com. And that way you get my schedule as to where I am and when I am and where I am and how you can find me, as well as other private videos that I put up over there for people who follow me on Locals. I do plan on streaming tonight at 10 p.m. I stream nightly at 10 p.m. on weekdays, and I plan on streaming tonight, God willing, at 10 p.m. Probably not about this trial, probably about other stuff. I might touch on this trial briefly, but I don't expect to be spending very long talking about it. I also expect to be back here tomorrow morning. I anticipate that it's going to be starting at 10 a.m. Eastern, based on the fact that they seem to start at 8 o'clock Mountain Time. So unless you hear otherwise, that is when I anticipate being back here. And that's pretty much my show. I think that's what we got. That's what we got. All right. I'll wait. Let me check. I want to check out the poll. Let me see the poll, which is more of a culty type cult. So 49% said I hit like and subscribe already, because that is sort of how I remind people to do that. 39% say the following. That's right. My member is here. And only 11% said said the cult of MAGA. So apparently I'm more of a culty type cult, which I do not believe that's true. I don't think that's true. But and speaking of which, Broken Baker and their viewers just joined. I don't know. I'm not sure who that is. I just got rated by Oh, I do know. I appeared on a stream with him on Michigan Law Show. Thank you so much. We are wrapping up here. So I'm going to say that if you just joined, if you could drop me a like and subscribe, I would be. It's a Baker raid. There you go, as Valhalla says. A Baker raid. The trial has concluded for the day. I will be back continuing with day 3 of the trial, God willing, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Eastern. I urge you all, please like, subscribe, and follow me on Locals. Tonight, I'll be starting hopefully around 10 p.m. with my nightly show. Till then, I thank you all for joining me. And as always, I say to you, be happy and eat the bugs. Godspeed.